Finish start.
So, yeah, I got some input. I probably won't stay on the whole time, but I do have some input. I just want to raise a few questions to people. So.
All right, cool. Well, we got Ben and we got Dan on with us too, and let's go ahead and get started. Dan, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, that sounds good. I think what we've got here is a conference call for those interested in calling in. I think there's a chat option here too on the website.
Yep.
And then what we're going to do is record it and put it out there for people to listen to later and go over it. But I've got a bunch of notes here myself, and I think Greg does too. And then I think we'll just take it where it leads us here and go from there. But it sounds like, Rob, you can't stay on too long, so we could tackle some of his questions here first. How does that sound?
That's fine. I got about 10 or 15 minutes, so and my stuff shouldn't take that long.
Yeah, let's do that. Greg, if you agree with that, let's get the ball going with Mr. Rob here and point out some of his questions because I've got 5 pages of notes here too, so I've got a bunch to go through. So let's start it off with Rob.
All right. Well, I've got some friends that are veterans. You know, they were in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm a weapon enthusiast myself, and know quite a bit about AR platform weapons and AK platform and things like that. And I won't say that an AR-15 wasn't used, but what I will say is that I know that I have fired an AR-15 with a 100-round drum on it with a bump fire stock, and that damn thing jammed up on me about 6 or 7 times. And in the video, you can clearly hear that there's no jamming in that weapon. So, what a lot of people have said is that they hear a belt-fired weapon being fired, which would be a lot of the ones in the military that are used for the M249 SAW, the M240 Bravo, even an M60. Somebody said that they heard an M60 being fired. So I got to think, we saw the leaked photographs of the hotel room, and, based on what I saw some AR-15s, I saw some, which are chambered in 5.56, or what the media refers to as 223 Remington. AR-10s are 308 or 7.62 by 5.1. The entire time, I don't hear only an AR-15. I heard a belt-fed weapon somewhere, and I can't tell you exactly where, but I'd have to find the video and share it in the thread on the Facebook on the Greg's post. But I heard a belt-fed weapon. I've just got to wonder why they wouldn't want to tell us that, and I would assume it's because this was not just a man that suddenly lost his mind. I'm sure that happens, but this story has so many holes in it. I can even begin to imagine what happened to this guy, other than maybe he was involved with somebody he shouldn't have been involved with, and he was just a patsy. So,
Rob, do you think there was a single shooter in this incident, or multiple shooters?
There was more than one, and I will reference. I can't remember who it was. I think maybe it was on your page, Dan, but somebody shared the audio of the police dispatch audio. I listened to the entire thing, and Las Vegas PD mentioned there being a shooter on the 29th floor. There's also, there was a footage of a cabbie that was in front of Mandalay Bay, and there was muzzle flash coming from what a lot of people speculate to be the 4th floor. And a lot of people, I see the whole strobe light thing, but a strobe light's not going to go in cadence with gunfire. It's just too much of a coincidence. So, and then you posted something on your Facebook today about the calls for service about 3 other active shooters at 3 other hotels. So, no, I think there had, at the very minimum, there was 2, possibly, from what I've read, up to 6.
Wow.
This is a lot of damage for one elderly man. I mean, not all 60-year-old men are in really bad shape. A lot of people think people in their 60s are these people walking around with canes and things like that. But this didn't look like a guy that was going to be able to handle that, because, to be honest with you, I'm 28. I can't sit there and fire an automatic weapon. And then the bump fire, the bump fire rifle I fired, it gets kind of hard after a minute or two. And they say this went on for, they said 10, 15 minutes or something like that. I couldn't do that. And, I'm probably in better shape than he was.
Were there, what's your comments on people saying that they were, the shots hearing in the background were actually just echoes of the existing shots?
Well, I don't know how that would make any sense, because the only thing there would be Mandalay Bay. There wasn't any buildings right next to it from what I've seen. So I think that's a bunch of malarkey. I don't think that's right at all.
Yeah, I agree. I think the whole the official narrative of a senior citizen man pulling off a Rambo type attack like this all by his lonesome is just preposterous, I think. But
right, and this was done strategically, and I don't think an elderly man could have pulled this off unless there's something about him we don't know, and that's kind of what I'm leaning on. What I know he worked at Boeing, but what else did he do? I don't think one guy pulled this off at all.
Do you think?
And I don't believe the ISIS narrative either. And those assholes, they claim everything. Every time something tragic happens, they're like, "Oh, we did it." So I could get a divorce from my wife, and they'd claim they're the reason why.
Yep.
So the ISIS angle is complete BS in my opinion too.
Do you think Stephen Paddock was involved at all? Was that even his body?
I don't know. It's kind of hard when you look at that. You look at that photograph. There's blood everywhere, and it's really hard to tell. And I don't know yet. I'm going to keep doing my own research and try to figure that out. But to me, that's kind of inconclusive in my mind at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we can start off with, Greg, before we get too farther along, is I'd like to clarify from a terminology standpoint. There's a lot of people saying that Stephen Paddock is the patsy, and saying that he was involved with something went wrong, terribly wrong, and then he ended up being killed, and he's the patsy. And I don't know if I have my terminology right, but a patsy to me is someone not involved, like Lee Harvey Oswald, who was blamed for a death. If you're involved in the operation, and then you're involved with it somehow, and then you're killed at the end, you're the fall guy for an operation. So I think before we start, when we get other callers here starting on, just to make clear that if you're the fall guy for an event, you were actively taking part of it in some way, shape, or form. A patsy had nothing to do with anything. The body was just either dumped there or he was murdered at the scene and made look to him. So that's what I'm going on my premise. Is that right from the other those listening now? Is that is that correct terminology before I get going any further?
That makes sense to me.
Ben?
Yeah, this is, and that would make a lot of sense to me. And if under that definition, I would consider him a patsy.
So you're saying, and this is who, Bob or?
Yeah, this is Ben.
Oh, Ben. Okay, yeah, we got a Ben and a Bob and a Robert on the line. So Ben, as far as you're thinking, if he's a patsy, then Stephen Paddock had nothing to do with it. Was probably just killed and thrown there and murdered, or maybe it wasn't even him. But you're thinking that he didn't have anything to do with the operation as far as actively shooting, standing there, firing weapons at all, but just a patsy as a patsy for this event. That's what your thinking is.
That's correct.
Okay, good. And we don't know what's right or wrong here. We're just going to, I think, give overviews. What's your thought, Greg Fernandez, on being a fall guy versus being a patsy as far as the terminology here?
I think the terminology is definitely right. I do wonder if maybe, maybe at one time, maybe he was involved in some shooting thing, but if he was going to do this, he had an opportunity 1 week before. So then it's like, well, why didn't he just, kill people then? Why? What was so different about this thing here? But yeah, it's. I don't see him as a patsy, even if he did get killed. I mean, because patsy would have to be he had no involvement, and of course, to be honest, to be fair though, I haven't seen any proof, and the police have no motive. So how do we know that this guy was involved in this stuff?
Yeah, correct, and that's a good point too. Very rarely do you see images leaked that quickly of the deceased shooter and the house and the hotel room like this case, and you typically don't see that. But one thing to be clear here before we get started, also, Las Vegas Metro Police had jurisdiction for this law enforcement case, and then it went to the FBI for some odd reason. The FBI came in, swooped in, and took jurisdiction of this case and took it over from the Las Vegas Metro Police. And it wasn't, just to be clear, it wasn't the Las Vegas field office of the FBI. It was FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., which took it over. And right after they took it over, those files were leaked. So the leaked images from law enforcement came from the FBI at the headquarters level, which really raises the question that I believe still, that they were leaked on purpose to lead the viewer down, to solidify this narrative. They were leaked on purpose. They were leaked. It wasn't just someone who leaked them on accident. So that got the whole thing, people thinking of, was it even really him or was it a lookalike? It appeared to be him, but why else would they leak those photos that fast? Have you three other listeners here on the line heard that as well, as far as the jurisdiction being taken over by the FBI and really taken it by a stranglehold out of the Las Vegas hands altogether?
Well, this is Ben, and that's I didn't realize that, but it makes sense that the FBI, the feds have it now. But what makes me, what I have a question about regarding that is how is it that the sheriff is giving all these press conferences, and now the undersheriff?
Well, the only thing that I heard was the original sheriff was giving it, and as it was taken over, he was giving either not the right answers as far as the narrative, or he didn't look cool, calm, and collective in giving his thoughts. So they brought in an undersheriff, which someone on one page, and this is just theory, who was probably just a hired person from the FBI wearing a sheriff's outfit. They said it noted that it didn't fit him particularly well. They never heard of this guy, and now he's doing all the PR. So that's, I think, just a mouthpiece for the FBI to keep the narrative on the straight and narrow, to keep the story straight. But I don't believe, that'd be a good question for anyone out there too, to look up this gentleman's name and face to see if he truly is the undersecretary there in Las Vegas. But they don't have jurisdiction. They should not be giving any interviews at all to the media, I don't think. So that also raises the question.
It's Rob here, and with my, my mom's been in law enforcement for a long time. I went to the academy. I was going to do law enforcement, and when things have happened outside of jurisdiction locally, and I'm not saying it works this way everywhere, but, there was you guys will probably know about this case. There was a Catholic priest that was brutally murdered here some years ago in his rectory, and the chief of police of Eureka Police Department and Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, who the sheriff at the time, Mike Downey, was actually doing PR because it happened in this county. Now, I'm not saying that would happen in Nevada because I don't know their laws and how those things work. I'm just giving an example of maybe that's why. But I'm ignorant on how Nevada works. I just wanted to throw that out there for people.
All right, very good. Now, Rob, I know you only have a few minutes left, Robert, but what are your thoughts on if Stephen Paddock had those two windows knocked out of his hotel room in the 32nd floor at Mandalay Bay? One was meant to shoot down on the concert goers. The other one was to take aim at those fuel tanks near the airport, some 2,000 feet away, to cause a major explosion. Is there any truth to that, or would that have been a plausible scenario as well, or is that just a red herring?
And again, I don't know how many yards, if anybody's next to a computer, if you could Google and see how many yards.
I've got it right here.
How many yards is 2,000 feet?
Oh, let's see, 2,000 feet, 695. It's 695 yards to the fuel tanks, which is 2,000 feet.
Okay.
And to the venue point, it was 400 yards to the venue, which is really 1,160 feet.
So and I'll go back to the narrative that an AR-15 was used. The effective range of an AR-15 is about 600 yards. After 600 yards, the round starts to drop. It starts to yaw, and it will start to go kind of anywhere. But again, if you have a fully automatic weapon, which the M249 SAW is chambered in .556. The M240 Bravo is 7.62 by 5.1, which is a lot of people know as that as being 308. So 308 has, I'm not exactly sure what the effective range on a 308 is, but it is beyond 600 yards. That's the first thing I'd heard about the fuel tanks. If you can tag me in something on Facebook about that, I'd like to see it. Again, it really depends on what caliber he was using. I'm not saying 5.56 can't get that far, but accurately, no, I don't think that it would. Depending on the grainage of the round, it's not getting that far accurately. So, but that's the first I heard about anything about fuel tanks.
If I could, and I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong if somebody knows, but I don't think the flash point of jet fuel, because jet fuel basically, as I know it, is just kind of high grade diesel fuel.
I couldn't say.
Yeah. I don't think the flash point, if you're going to shoot a steel tank drum like that, I don't think you can get it to explode.
Okay, and that could be too. That could be a red herring, but I've been following that in the case as well. That that second window broken out at Mandalay Bay on the other adjoining room that Stephen Pollock allegedly had rented was, you didn't have a clear view of the concert stage or the concert goers from that window. So what would he have been shooting at? And so they thought of the fuel tanks. And one scenario was whoever the shooters were if shooting at the concert goers down below, they would all flee to that empty area. There's about an empty acre or two of space just beyond the concert goers, but right in front of that fuel tank. And if that would have been hit with, for instance, a 50 caliber round and something like that ignited, it would have killed thousands of people, which was possibly the major intent of all this. Because we heard the president say, this is a miracle that we saved all these lives, and no one really knew what that meant. But what I've been reading on some forums and some boards is that this event was intended to kill multiple thousands of people, and we were lucky by just the 59 dead result. Because and so one scenario was to have multiple explosions. Now we did have a police report too that was, I think, confirmed too, of the car bomb that was in the Luxor Hotel with antennas sticking out of it in an Audi. And authorities took an hour to dismantle and take that away too. That was meant for the same event as another, either a diversionary tactic or to kill more people. And then he had all this ammunition in the trunk of his car in the hotel with all this, I don't know what it was, but this. So if there were supposed to be, it sounds to me, multiple bombings, explosions, weapons, and things going off on to make it be some huge event. And all that happened was some shooters and, some shooters going off, killing 59 people. So that's what I've been hearing. And once again, that could be a red herring. That could be a distraction, but those things, and we'll get into also with these police reports and the police dispatch, those aren't made up things that someone was just, bringing into the scene. Those were logged events on dispatch by police that night. Well, Robert, anything else that you have to share then before you have to roll?
I've still got some time. The thing that I'm curious about, and I did see one headline. I can't remember where it was, but what I'm curious about is surveillance footage. Now, I did see a headline that says that he allegedly was able to get rid of the surveillance, and he was able to disable the fire alarms in a casino. Mandalay Bay is not a low-profile casino. It's not a corner casino in Vegas. It's a pretty popular place, and I would like to know how a man, again, with no sort of tactical training or anything like that, other than he was a defense contractor for Boeing, how that would happen in such a heavily populated in a heavily populated building such as Mandalay Bay. So, has anybody heard anything about that? Because I find that to be very suspicious, and it almost would confirm that, of course, if there's no surveillance footage of this guy, who's to say he was ever there?
Yeah, I would agree. Every place, every almost square inch of Vegas is surveillance on it at some point. Especially, I don't believe personally Paddock did anything with the fire alarms, the smoke detectors, or the surveillance cameras. But if someone did, it was a tactical team or multiple people disabling these devices. Is what my thoughts were, if indeed they were disabled.
Yeah, and like I said, that kind of in my mind, if there's no footage released of this individual doing this in a place where there's surveillance everywhere, that would almost confirm to me in my mind that he may not have even been there, and a dead body was dumped in that room to further push the narrative that we're getting. That when I saw that, I really questioned it. I was like, how would this guy, who allegedly has no specialized training, be able to do this? That's something I've been thinking about for the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, this is Ben, by the way. I come out of the communications world, and I happened to be at a conference last week in Vegas, and actually the conference was at Mandalay Bay. So I was there for 3 days, and came home on Friday morning. So of course this thing happens Sunday night. So while I was there, I probably talked to 20 locals, and like I say, the conference was at Mandalay Bay. So and I come out of the communications world, and I used to engineer closed circuit TV systems and a lot of different things. And yeah, the whole lack of any any tape, I mean, anything from those cameras, that's just a huge red herring. I mean, you can't fart in that hotel without somebody hearing you, because they have everything, man. They've got not only cameras, they've got, microphones everywhere. And it just goes on and on and on. So that's just a huge red flag. And then the other part is, I guess, I think I seen somewhere where somebody from the security department seemed to like they leaked a picture of his car. I'm thinking, wasn't it a brown van, if I remember right?
Yeah, I've got an image of that in the parking garage.
Right. Yeah. So that was leaked, I would think, by somebody in the security office there. And keep in mind that security office at Mandalay Bay or a lot of those big casinos like MGM and so forth, that's basically a fusion center. So, like I say, you can't fart in a casino without somebody knowing it.
If you don't mind me asking, you said that you worked at your telecom experience comes from did you work for a cable provider, or did you work for like a CCTV company? What was your background in that? I'm just curious.
Oh, yeah. I come out of computer networking, and then that tied into the cameras and fiber optics and all that good stuff. And then I engineered CCTV systems for an engineering firm here in Sacramento.
Okay.
So Ben, you coming from the industry, I would say, let me know if this is a fair statement to make. Mandalay Bay has the video footage of anything they want to see there at the location. They're just withholding it from us under the guise, potentially, that someone disabled it. Someone may have disabled it, but regardless, they're withholding it from us anyway, because this should have been, people are asking for footage of him. Is there Stephen Paddock there, even running to the bathroom, having a bite to eat, through the hallway, up and down the elevators? There's no footage of him at all, and that's just not the case. There would be footage. They're just withholding the footage from us.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
If he was even there.
Correct.
Well, supposedly he was a high roller there.
Yeah, he could have been. He more than likely probably was. Yep.
Or a whale, as they call them.
Yeah.
Now
he
the other
tried to.
The other thing, because you were there, Ben. Another thing I want to specify for the listeners out there is Mandalay Bay is a huge complex, huge hotel, but the hotel portion of it goes up to floors, I think, 34, and then on
46, I believe.
Okay, that's the total. But the Four Seasons Hotel is comprised of floors 35 through 39. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yep, and that's what I've seen somewhere else too. The Four Seasons Hotel does not have a hotel in Vegas, but it's comprised within the Mandalay Bay complex, made up of the four floors in that hotel. And now, who owns the Four Seasons is Bill Gates and a large Saudi billionaire, or the two owners of that. Now, that weekend when you were there, and I think the weekend when the shootings took place, after you left, there was a large contingent of Saudi royals or something there, using up that space or using up much of the rooms in the Four Seasons because of that. Was that ever brought up or brought to your attention or anything as well?
No, I didn't see any Saudis or anybody in their bed sheets in a high number there when I was there. Although, and keep in mind now, I think though, going back to the windows and everything, I think the reason, my thought would be the reason they shot out both windows, or supposedly shot out both windows, or a hammer, or whatever the case may be, broke them out, was because if you count between those two broken windows, there's 9 broken windows, and then if you count to the floors above 32, well, there's 43 floors in that whole building. So here again, you got a 9/11 going on.
I'm sorry. You mean between the broken windows, there were windows that were unbroken, and totaling 9 between them?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. You said broken, so I was just confused. So yep, that would make sense. Yeah, he had the big suite, the wraparound suite, and then the adjoining room next to it. And yeah, that would make sense. That's a big space up there.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I'm looking at that photo now. 9 windows. I didn't even notice that.
And then 11 to the top. So that's just more, more. They're just more signaling.
That's crazy.
I want to bring up a question here, and I'm going to go back to Sandy Hook. Now, what was, I think the alleged shooter's name is Adam Lanza, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Now I believe they found out why did they ever find out why he went and did this? Did they ever allegedly uncover a plan that this kid came up with?
Not that I know of. I think they blamed it on psychotropic drugs and problems and other things with his, what was his, not mental illness, but he's suffering from something is what allegedly. And I think that they have essentially just ruled that all these things put together created the perfect storm. But there was no real plan that I've ever heard of that he had planned.
Okay. And the other thing that I've been thinking about is they say that he had a camera on a cart in the hallway to see if the authorities were so he could see when the authorities were coming to his room, And then he supposedly was filming himself doing this. Now, the first thing I'd like to know is I'd like to know who the security guard was that was shot. I haven't seen any information on him yet. I'd like to know who he is, and then I would almost feel that, people are raising these questions, like, where's the surveillance footage? Where is all this stuff at? If he truly filmed himself doing this, you're not going to see anything graphic. If he was really there, you're not going to really see anything graphic of him firing these weapons. So if this footage at Mandalay Bay was supposedly, like we just discussed, gone, if they really want to stop people from questioning the legitimacy of their narrative, then I would think that they would release that footage. But as we all know, I don't think that's going to happen. And just this conversation, I'm starting to believe that this was this was done by somebody else and somebody that either looked like him or was him that was staying in that room and was just killed, so then they could blame this guy. So that people wouldn't question it. They've had, his computer. And I know they said he had a laptop, and I'm sure that if he really had an elaborate plan, and you don't do something this elaborate without having a motive. At least I don't think that you would. So it's been almost how long has it been? Almost a week.
Sunday night. So, 6 days tonight. It's been 6 days ago.
I would figure that at this point they would have uncovered a narrative already or a motive, and the longer it takes for them to come up with something, which is what I think exactly what they're going to do, the more people are going to start to question this. So they haven't come up with anything other than the headline I saw, a madman descending into darkness. Well, we get that narrative all the time. It just ain't working anymore.
Yeah.
Somebody doesn't just snap like this and elaborately plan something like this out for a week.
Well, I would imagine they will release some footage in the near future. They'll release some footage of him, and it'll all be doctored and just what they want to say. But going back to some ballistics and things, what I've been curious about, Rob, is the amount of brass in that room. It seems like it was just a minuscule amount.
It didn't look like a lot, and if he was really sitting there, I wish we could have. I wish there was some footage of the entire 10 minutes of this entire event, because if we had that and we look at those photos and you look at all the brass on the ground, you'd be able to determine, there's, like you said, there's not a lot in there, and that also raises the speculation that, hey, obviously there's more than one shooter, because there's not enough brass in this room for what this guy did, for what they're claiming that he did. It doesn't make sense to me, and that was something I thought about. I said, oh, that's not a lot of brass for what they're saying he did.
Right, and then the brass, and then a lot of the brass that's there is unfired.
Mm-hmm. I did see some photos of ammunition that was still considered to be live. It hadn't been fired yet. I thought that was very interesting.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Welcome.
Just patched in. Hey, what's up, dude? How's it going?
All right, man. What's going on?
Not much. I was just eavesdropping on your conversation there, and about the brass. That is very true. For the amount of rounds that should have been fired, I've fired AK-47s, M16s, and the other part that doesn't really make sense is if it was that many shots fired, the rug in that room more than likely would have burned up. The more you shoot, the hotter that muzzle gets, the hotter those brass shell casings are, and I've burned myself on many occasions, not having on the proper long sleeve gloves. I mean, that's my question. I want to know where, those pictures don't really add up. There should have been massive burn holes, or possibly even set that whole room on fire.
I'll validate exactly what he said too, and again, they haven't specified how many guns he actually used in the shooting, at least from what I've read. So, you fire a weapon like that, if he only used one or two, I would imagine that on an AR-15, if you're firing that many rounds that quickly, that barrel's going to burn up real fast.
And then the other thing, I'm not sure how far the actual, how many feet it was from that room to that venue, but M16,
it was 400 yards.
400 yards? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not sure what 400 yards is translated into feet, but I do know that 1,200 feet, usually with a fully automatic rifle, like that's usually your range of a controlled shot to where you can accurately hit a target.
Right.
So I'm not sure in feet. Well, I mean, just visually, it looks like, I'm thinking maybe modified 50 cal or something like that. Maybe a smaller, grade bullet, but just that distance between it, that doesn't really add up to me either.
And that's where I brought in the belt-fed weapon theory that he was using an M240 Bravo, which is 7.62x5.1.
Oh, the NATO round, yeah.
Yeah, 308. So that and the 600 the fuel tank angle, those 308 rounds would reach. They would surpass 700 yards for sure. So I'm just like I've been saying this to everybody that I've talked to. I just say this whole thing stinks because you can listen to the shooting. There was one particular video, and I'll tag Dan and Greg in it. It sounded like a belt-fed LMG. That's what it sounded like to me. I've never fired one. I've heard them fired before. I have friends on my Facebook that are veterans that have been to Iraq and Afghanistan who have fired those weapons, and they say that it sounds like a belt-fed weapon. And somebody even brought up the PKM, which is a Russian LMG. So I'm curious as to what was actually used, and if it was an LMG, they're not going to tell us that, because that's not something that just any average Joe can go to a gun store and say, hey, I want that light machine gun you got. That's not happening. Now I know that you can buy. There is a civilian version of the M249 saw, pretty pricey, but this guy had the money. But I'm not sure how he would modify that unless it was done on the black market. And then it goes back to me questioning whether this man even had any involvement of any kind at all.
This is Dan. Just wanted to do someone did the math here. Roughly 1,500 rounds were fired. If this did take place on the 32nd floor of this hotel room, what would 1,500 rounds of brass look like on the floor? I'm not a weapons person, but you guys are. That would be quite the pile, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah, you could. You could bathe in it. You could probably bathe in 1,500 shell casings.
Okay, but isn't it possible that the reason why we don't see those shell casings in those photos is because he moved them?
Who moved them?
The shooter, if he was the shooter.
Why would he move the shell casings?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
No, and I understand you're trying to think of every possible scenario here.
Right.
I just don't see how he could have enough time to do that in between the time that he was firing and the time that he wasn't.
Well, maybe he wanted to make nice with housekeeping.
Right? Wanted a tip.
This is Ben again. Hey man, I got a question regarding so those curtains, right? Those curtains are blowing out the windows. And those are big, huge drapes. You've been in a hotel room. You know that those are heavy drapes because they block the light, So what are your thoughts about those drapes being in his way? And shouldn't those be all burned up too and all the rest of it?
I would imagine the heat from the barrel would have, at the very least, frayed them a little bit. It doesn't look like they're frayed at all. They look like they're in great shape.
Yeah, so let's get back to the 32nd floor. Has anybody seen any muzzle flash out of those 32nd floor windows?
I haven't seen anything on YouTube about that muzzle flash. The only thing I've seen is muzzle flash coming from what would be the 4th and the 12th floor.
I think there might be some video that shows the same type of flash that we see kind of midway in that building. I'm gonna have to look at that. What's crazy is because there's been so many videos that have been taken down, so we had to grab as many as we could when all of this first happened.
That's a good point. I've noticed a lot of YouTube being scrubbed as well.
Well, I'll have to go back and see if I can find what I saw on what would have been Tuesday night. That has anybody seen the video of that cabbie that was? It was a female cabbie. Has anybody seen that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. This is.
I'd be curious to see if that's still up.
I believe that's still up. There's a lot of places that have replicated and mirrored that video footage. That's the best footage there is of the entire event. And not the spliced, edited stuff you'll see on NBC, but the actual video footage from the female taxi driver beneath the Mandalay Bay. She covers it very well, and many people have called that the Zapruder film here of the Las Vegas shooting, because that exposes a lot of things that just don't add up as on that video.
All right.
Now, the other thing, if you're, for the viewers out there listening to this here after this broadcast, do a Google search on the Delano Hotel in Las Vegas, because that's where the other flashes of light are coming from, the upper floors of the Delano Hotel, where I think potentially I'm still keeping open the possibility that the shooting took place from there on the rooftop of the Delano. That's right behind Mandalay Bay with the great same exact viewpoint of the concert goers.
Wow, I didn't even hear about that.
And that just came out yesterday and today. I've been following pages with that. And that seems to be the best angle of where a tactical team or something, gunfire was actually coming from, I believe. You know, we still don't know if anything came from the 32nd floor. Like we said, the brass should have been piles and piles of, even if you fired off, 750 rounds from each of those windows to make the 1,500, it still doesn't make up. It looks like someone took sprinkled some casings there on the floor for a good photo op. But for the new listeners just joining us here now, let's keep in mind the narrative that mainstream media has given us is that the 64-year-old man was going back and forth shooting between open windows on the 32nd floor of Mandalay, while at the same time switching guns because of the heat, checking a surveillance camera, looking out the hallway, and then checking the surveillance of the camera that was mounted in the eye peephole of the window of the hotel door as well. So none of this is even plausible. I think that we've got a senior citizen Rambo up there doing all these things. So it doesn't. None of it even makes sense. Some have even implied the fact that 32nd floor room at Mandalay Bay was just the drop zone. Some weapons were dropped there. After the effect, a dead body was dropped there. Some windows were knocked out, and then no firing took place there at all. Just the body was killed. You know, there was blood there, so someone was killed there, but maybe nothing took place there at all. We know shots came from the flashes from the 4th floor, and like someone mentioned, I think it was the 10th, 12th, or even the 15th floor also. But we know from witnesses on the YouTube videos that shooting also came from the ground. And we've got police documentation that shows incidents reported of shots fired at the Bellagio, New York, Tropicana, and I believe somewhere else. I mean, shots were fired. So the point, I guess, of this presentation, of this broadcast is it's almost positive now we got multiple shooters and multiple weapons and multiple locations. So how can we get this into the mainstream effectively, if at all?
Well, this has been again. And I'll go to the bottom. I'll go to the bottom line for you guys. My thought is that I think his name is Robert Steele. Like he has claimed, and he's a ex-CIA operative, retired for 10 years now or whatever. But anyway, he kind of puts all the pieces together, and this has always been running in the back of my mind kind of since this happened, with all the symbolism and everything, that really this is a Mossad. This is mostly a Mossad operation. And, of course, they use their Masons in order to do a lot of the dirty work. But that's who's running the show. And and there's multiple agendas going on, and one of the biggies that Trump's involved with, because I think it goes right to the top for him, but one of the biggies is it ends up being just enhancing TSA's surveillance around the country, and they get to sell a whole lot more, backscatter X-ray machines, and they get to grope us and our kids more as we walk into the grocery store as we move along in years here. But I think that's the bottom line on this thing.
Good point, Ben, and this is Dan once again. Michael Chertoff and OSI Systems is the company here involved that makes the scanners for these kind of things. And I think the fear of this type of operation like this, which I'll call an Operation Gladio type of operation, to create fear and instill fear, is to create, we had the underwear bomber, the shoe bomber, and next thing you know at the airports, everyone's got to go through the scanner, the X-ray scanner. Now they're going to, I think, try to make a push in legislation to get these types of scanners involved, included at all casinos, all hotels, all events for concerts, sporting events, arenas, theaters, and that's going to skyrocket the stocks of these types of companies huge, and the people behind it is our favorite Mr. Michael Chertoff, OSI Systems, and those same culprits from past false flag events, essentially. It's the same people, and money is the end game. Money and making the big bucks is the end result of these kind of events. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. Well, it's two things. It's money, of course, but kind of the bigger issue is it's spiritual. It's a demonic influence and fear-based, and just always continually making population fearful, and that's what the devil does. He's running obviously Mossad and the Zionists in Israel, and then those Zionists use the Freemasons, like I said, as their henchmen to do things on the local level. And they're at the top above 32, and ironically enough, 32nd floor, and then also I think that was the other numerology symbolism of all this was he was on the 32nd floor. So maybe old Paddock is a real guy, and because he was involved in this, he's now a 33rd degree Mason because he did what he was supposed to do. I'm not saying he shot anybody, but he was there as the ball guy or the patsy.
Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism and the occult and numerology and things in this event. If you look at the pictures and images that have come through, I mean, it's taking place near the Luxor, which is that black pyramid. It took place on the 32nd floor. You've got a concert event called the Harvest Festival or the Harvest Fest, Harvest 91. 91 takes place on Route 91. It took place on 10/1. You put those numbers together, it's 9/11/01, 2001. You've got a lot of, Jason Aldean is the one performing on the stage. He's got a tattoo on his left arm that's a jack and an ace. Numbers in those cards, it's a 10 and a 1, 10-1 also. It's also the Illuminati card for Las Vegas shooting is the same card combination, 10 and a 1. There's a lot of things going on here behind the scenes that would lead to that type of thing. I brought this up earlier as well, and I'm not sure what the connection, but does Bohemian Grove have a sister organization or some other type of organization that relates to this type of year, human sacrifice or something in harvest season or harvest time of the year? Greg, do you know of anything like that?
I'm going to have to ask. I'm going to have to do a little research and ask a couple people because I've never heard of that. But
okay.
I do believe that there are certain times. I mean, yeah, that there's been theories of them doing some sacrifices. I do know that the Bohemian Grove does a private concert, and it was heavily focused on country music this year. So I was looking to see if there was any ties between, the people who were at the Bohemian Grove country music show and whatever happened here. But so far, I haven't found anything. So I'm not seeing any ties as of now. But I do know a couple people that I do want to ask that, who would probably have a lot more knowledge.
And then I know Ben brought up Mossad. Another angle I've heard is, could this have been pulled off by Blackwater type of craft international mercenaries, Blackwater mercenaries, like we've seen some of the footage there at the Boston bombing with guys, for some reason, of Craft International. That's Chris Kyle's company. They're on the scene. Mercenaries like that. We've got the black helicopter here in Vegas, if you've seen that, going through while this was all happening too. And it's a lot of other things going on behind the scenes that could have been. But it does seem to me that it was not a lone wolf, obviously. But if it was a team, what kind of a team was it? It seemed very professional to me, the way the whole thing went down.
Yep. It would have to be.
Does anybody feel, and obviously when these things happen, Dan and Greg know I post about firearms pretty frequently on Facebook, and I'm pretty passionate about that right that I have. Does anybody feel like this is more of another way to start slowly voting away firearms, or is this more of what Dan suggested, that now we're going to have deeper surveillance, or is it both?
Both.
I would say both. I think it's obviously a part of a gun grab, I think, too, a Second Amendment thing, and security installations for taking away rights. You got to go through, you got to get scanned no matter where you're going to go nowadays. I think it's all those things wrapped up into one thing.
Well, there's one thing to think about when government, whether it be at local level or something like this, anytime government does something nefarious, there's multiple agendas at play at the same time.
I agree.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, there's never just one thing. There's a multitude of people are going to benefit from an event of this nature. So that's another reason I think you rule out the lone gunman.
And they actually called him a lone wolf. That was the first term that I heard, and even that was like, what? What are you guys talking about? A lone wolf? Where does that term come from?
Well, that's what they've been pushing. That since 9/11, they've been saying, "Oh God, we got to, the lone wolf is going to be the terrorist that gets this nation killed," and here we are. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this at all, but this shooting took place on the 2-year anniversary of the Umpqua Community College shooting as well, 2 years ago to the day.
Wow.
Where the other lone wolf started shooting at the college.
Which college was this?
That was up in Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, if I can kind of go off track a second, only because I've got a friend who is going to go to some security training for our church, because our church actually has armed security in the parking lot pretty much ever since, what was that church that got shot up by that guy? There you go. I didn't really follow that much, but I believe that to be a false flag. Can you give me a brief on that real quick?
Oh, I'm still kind of ignorant on it.
Yeah, I could give a little bit on that. This is Dan. Dylan Roof supposedly went into a church and shot up a bunch of people, and then was arrested. And on the way to the police station, they stopped at Burger King because he wanted a burger. And then that had all the false flags came out on that one as well. That was in, I think, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Right, and he was I think he was on drugs too, right?
They blamed he was imbalanced, lone wolf, out of control. Yeah, it was the same kind of a scenario. I followed that one too. I don't believe that happened the way that it went. I believe that was a staged event as well.
Yeah, that was really, really sad because it was a very small church, and they actually what was really crazy was how the church responded to this shooting. They were not angry. It wasn't. There was definitely something weird happening here. They
wanted forgiveness right away that same afternoon. I think they said, we're not angry. We went right to the forgiveness phase of grieving.
Which I mean,
do you think
I don't necessarily doubt that either. But it takes a very strong. Go ahead.
So you think people really died then?
Yeah, I mean, I'm
open to that. I'm not locked into anything. I think it was an orchestrated event. I'm not sure if it was necessarily a hoax.
All right. Well, good. Yeah, I just wasn't sure how to. I'm going to need to do more research, but I wasn't sure how to present this to my friend and say, I think you're being duped. I kind of brought it up to the security team one day. One of the guys, I was on my way into church. I said, "Hey, man," I go, "You ever research that Dylan Roof shooting and all that?" I said, "That's what precipitated what you're doing out here." And I said, "Man, the worst part is you're missing the sermon." And so I haven't really gone any further with it.
Right.
One way to approach someone like that for that is if you go back to that Wisconsin Sikh temple shooting that took place about 5 years ago. Do you remember that case where they had another lone wolf gunman went off and killed a bunch of people and ended up shooting himself at the end? That's what kind of started.
Always kill them.
What's that?
They always kill themselves. It drives me crazy that we can never catch these people that are doing these things.
The Wisconsin. Okay, I'm looking.
Now, what you get with a situation like that, witnesses that came forward right away and their testimony all got scrubbed from the web, is that they said there were 3 shooters at the scene. 2 fled along with the bystanders and left one of their comrades dead as part of the operation. But they're able to then play the card that he killed himself because the weapons were the same. They shot him in the head at the end, saying that he did it himself. But witnesses were 100% proof that there were 3 shooters at that scene. So much like Aurora Theater, where you've got 2 or more shooters, the Wisconsin Sikh Temple, you've got 3 or more shooters, but there's always a lone wolf gunman that one person does it. So typically it's a team or it's a organized team effort where one of them gets left behind on purpose and the rest flee and the case is solved, problem solved. And that's kind of what I see here too, is if Stephen Paddock was a gunman on the 32nd floor, and he did take part, then I would call him the fall guy because I think one of his very own on the team killed him as they all fled and made it look like he did it himself. That could have been the case in the Dylan Roof church shooting as well. People may certainly have died, but Dylan Roof did not just go into that church by himself, didn't know a soul, and started shooting up the place. There's more to that story than what we're being told. But that's a good one to bring up there to your group if you want to Google that event as well.
Yeah, I'll look for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say we have to be really careful about, when we talk about like shootings and people not dying and all that stuff, because unless we have something there, unless we have some type of proof, sure, we have to be open to it, but at the same time, I do wonder if we're kind of, there's a chance that we could also be tricked into thinking that there weren't bodies when there actually were too.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you pointed that, you touched on that. My a friend of mine, he's another, he's like-minded like we are, 9/11 Truth and things like that. He was FaceTiming with his cousin at when this concert was going on, and his cousin was there. And I guess my friend he called me that next morning, and he said, well, you heard what happened in Vegas, right? And I said, yeah, I did. I just saw it. And he said, well, I was FaceTiming my cousin, and he said, I started hearing the gunshots, and he said, and I saw some dude that was next to my cousin's head explode. So, you know, he said that's what he told me. So I wanted to touch on that I don't think that this was a hoax. You know, I look at Sandy Hook. I think that was a hoax. I think that was a big hoax. I don't think anybody died there. And I could be wrong, but you know, when you speak about hoaxes and shootings, that's the one that sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, and I like to refer to those myself as either orchestrated events or you know, an operation. So whether people died or not, with Sandy Hook, for those who think it's a hoax, which may very well could be in the school, we still have to account for Nancy Lanza's death and Adam Lanza's death. And so that's a, you know, the church one, I think, in a lot of these cases, there were actual deaths because a lot of these orchestrated events do include violence. They're not hoaxes altogether where nothing took place, but sometimes there are and sometimes they're not. But the point of that, like this broadcast here tonight, is that we're not being told the truth by the mainstream media, which is it's their job to do that. We're being lied to. Now the question is, why are we being lied to? Are things being covered up? More than likely, yes. The question is why. So that's just like this case. You know, we've got I've got here Fox News on this case said there confirmed an active shooter on the 24th floor for Fox News. Well, that's not the case. Bally's said we've got a suspect involved at Bally's. You know, and so these aren't made up reports. They're not hoaxes, but we think people did die here, but to what level? That's why I'm looking forward personally to this when the medical examiner's reports comes out to identify these wounds. That'll help us determine what type of rounds were used, what type of caliber, and what angle. If there were horizontal shots at someone's head, that was probably a ground shooter that couldn't have physically taken place from the 32nd floor of a building. You know, those shots
right.
in a second are going to come at a certain angle, right?
Yeah, and if there were any people that died because they were trampled on.
Right, and you know, I've heard a description of some of the wounds that were there, and people are talking, you know, $half size holes in people's body, and that strikes me as something a little bigger than a 5.56, because from what my understanding of 5.56, what it does is when it hits the body, it typically will keep, unless it's a hollow point, and even some hollow points can keep going, but a lot of my friends that were in the military said that they would rather get shot by a 7.62 by 3.9, which is the AK round, rather than a 5.56, because when that 5.56 round hits you, it can hit you in your wrist, it will travel up your arm, it will go across your collarbone and out your other shoulder. There was a friend of mine that was I think he was in the Marine Corps, and I never saw the photograph, he said, but he saw one of his guys that was in his unit get shot in the left shoulder, and that round traveled across his shoulder and up his neck, and it went out of his cheek right in front of his eye. So when I hear the descriptions of wounds, that's where I'm thinking that a bigger round than 5.56 was used.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because we also need to know what the size of the wound was, because then we can see were there any close range, you know, shots, or can we? I mean, how do they really prove, and why are they even saying at this point that all of the shots came from this one person, came from this one building? So they must already have that proof, or they should not be saying that.
Right.
The other thing I'd like to point out, and we brought this up a little earlier, this is Dan. how helpful the employees have been at Mandalay Bay. And I know, Ben, you were just there last week at the hotel, but some of the best whistleblowers so far that have come forward have been the parking garage attendant or whoever it was who took that photograph of Stephen Paddock's vehicle and his check-ins at the hotel. That's a great piece of information because that doesn't go along with the mainstream media again. And the person at the restaurant who took a photo of that receipt of his room service charge on the 27th, where Stephen Paddock had dinner delivered to his room, and the guests number were two guests. He had dinner with someone in his room the 27th. Now, that's good. What we would like to see going forward is the only way we can thwart some of these things is if people on the inside release information that's opposing information from the mainstream media, because it is fact, and there's no way to dispute that. And going back to that parking lot attendant, I've got the image on my Facebook page, but if you zoom in, you can see that Stephen Paddock's vehicle arrived on the 25th of September, and then he came in and parked again on the 26th of September. Now, the mainstream media says he didn't even check in till the 28th. So we know that that's false because he's already there and checked in under his name, not as a guest, but as his name was on that. His car was there as checked in at the hotel. Then we get the receipt from dinner room service that was served on the 27th of September in his room that had two guests. Now, right away now we know that the narrative of him checking in on the 28th is incomplete because he already was there. Now, the only thing that I've seen that has disputed that, which could have been the claim here, is he had the original room on the 25th, 26th, and 27th, and then he booked that adjoining room on the 28th, and that's what got leaked to the press that he checked in on the 28th. But if they would have been doing their homework, they still would have noticed the fact that they would have retracted that story or said that he was there longer. So we've already got the evidence there that he was there much longer than just checking in on the 28th for a little weekend of gambling. He was already there in advance per the records.
So what and I don't know if anybody else has heard this. My friend Rory had said that that the rooms weren't even in his name, that they were under his girlfriend's name, and that when they finally got to him, that he had her identification on him. Now, has anybody else heard that?
Yeah, this is Dan. I've heard that. Anyone else here on the call heard that?
No, I have not.
Okay. No. So what the original press released when it came out in the news about this shooting was that he had used her identification to book rooms at the hotel and use her cards. So now we get back into this almost like a Sandy Hook where you get Anna Lanza, what Ryan Lanza's identification was on him. And I think those are types of things done by Intel to misdirect and redirect people to start getting the story confused. Now, if he's checked in on that room under her name, all the activity would be under her name. And her name was Mary Lou Danley, right? So that parking garage image that I've got on my Facebook page clearly shows the name is Stephen Paddock, which means he must be registered. So I don't believe the fact that he was registered under her name, because then her name would have showed up under that room number. He would have been ordering room service for that room on the 27th of September, would have been in her name, Mary Lou Danley. The receipt on that dinner shows Stephen Paddock, clearly. So the media, once again, is misleading us that he checked in under that name. I mean, he may have checked in under the name, but what I'm saying is that evidence, the facts that we have is that his name's popping up. Now, unless he also was registered, I would think that the hotels I've checked in and done room service in is usually in the person who rented the room, not everybody's name who's in the party. It's only one name. So I doubt that, and so that could be the whole misdirection thing. Now, he also, it sounds like, shipped her off on the 25th to the Philippines because he got a good deal on an air flight ticket. And that kind of jives with the fact that he checked in originally on the 25th to the hotel anyway to do his bad deed here. But then it doesn't make sense why he booked the additional adjoining room on the 28th. He could have booked them all, but maybe one was rented and then one was comped, or both was comped, or one was comped, and then 3 days later they were comped an additional room. But somehow, I think we've got the media up against the ropes here on how he checked in, because I think that's proven false.
Okay, because I hadn't seen anything about that until he mentioned it, and I tried to do a little bit of research on that, and I didn't really see anything pop up. So that's why I asked if anybody else had heard about that.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece too, because that tells me that the media is in bed with this event and is trying to push the narrative of a certain angle. Because now we've already got them busted on a couple things: the check-in date, the names, and this other information. I mean, it's just they don't have the right. The story is not correct. The story is not fluid. It does not make sense. And so they can't explain that away as just an error somehow down the road.
Now, the other thing that we haven't touched on yet, and a surprise nobody's brought it up, and I just remembered it, was the woman that was telling everybody that they were going to die about an hour before the shooting started. Now, what does everybody think about that? Does that seem like something that actually happened, or is that just some other angle?
Well,
go ahead,
we should
Greg.
have more than one. We should have more than one person saying that, and maybe there are other people that can verify that. It sounds like there should be at least a dozen, maybe 30, 40, 50 people that should be able to verify that this happened. The people, if this lady was actually escorted out, then we should be able to see, then the security that took this person out should be able to tell us that. My thing is, I want to find out now. I think a lot of us want to find out now, and we're wondering, at least I'm wondering, why more on that has not come out yet, if it is true.
Right.
Yeah,
that's why I presented that question.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good point, because the woman in the video did say that it was 45 minutes before the shooting began that a couple, it was a woman and her boyfriend or husband or someone she was with, were both saying this to people as they were pushing their way toward the front. And by the time they got to the front row, they were causing such a scene that security escorted this couple out. Now, I can't believe this woman interviewed on television who said this made it up, or if she was a crisis actor or a paid actor or something to say that, because it doesn't jive with anything.
Do you have her name?
I don't have her name, but you're right. She said that she was pushing her way up to the front, causing almost a fight with the woman in front of her, that there should be, like you said, Greg, a dozen people coming forward, including the security team that escorted this woman and her friend out, to vouch or validate that statement. I agree with that.
Right, I agree. And I think that's just a misdirection, a red herring. But anyway, okay, so now footage from stage right that we've all seen, it seems like it might have been, it was an elevated, maybe an elevated bar or something. You know the footage I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so I did a little research. On the woman who took that footage, and I was looking at her Facebook page, and I think she is a crisis actor.
Do you have
the reason
her name?
I don't have it in front of me. No, I'm outside. But the reason I think she's a crisis actor is I was going through her Facebook page, and she is from Ohio, and she had just done an event for Hurricane Harvey, and the name of the event was like Sin City. It was like Sin City something or other hurricane relief. I think it was a bar. I think the bar might have been called Sin City, or I don't know. But I just got a really bad feeling from her. And kind of, I just thought maybe I'd throw that out there.
She seemed a little too calm, too. Not somebody that was just, nearly a victim. I thought that was odd, and that was touched on one time, and I haven't seen anything about it since.
Do we know anything more about this person? Or is that...
I don't recall. It was that, like I said, I woke up that Monday morning like 1:30 a.m. and I turned on the news, and that was the only footage that the Lane Screen Media was showing, and it had her name up in the top left hand corner of the shot. And so I started to look into her, and then I just went to her page, and there were a few things that just seemed a little odd about what she's done in her past.
Now, Ben, a good point on that for our listeners as well is whether or not there was paid actors or crisis actors on scene. There was an ad, a crowdsourcing ad placed for this, not for this event, but for that time frame in the Las Vegas area, looking for people to take part in a crowd event like this. And so we've seen this before with Craigslist ads, whether it's for the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting, things like that. We'll pay you if you want to come and partake in our events. It's usually done from a PR firm or something like that. And I did see those for this Las Vegas location as well. And I'm not saying there was crisis actors. I'm also not saying that there wasn't. But there indeed was an ad placed for people to sign up to become a paid actor for some big event coming up. And it didn't say what it was for. So you're right on the money there on some of these things.
I don't understand why these crisis places go through Craigslist. It seems like that's, that would be the last place I would want to go to because it's the most public place. So that does make me, that makes me wonder, like, why would they do that? Why not just do it in a more private setting? But because
I
would a lot of the Craigslist.
I think that the main thing with that is that a lot of people in society are so dumb now that they wouldn't even think about it. And it takes people that look at these things like us, and we try to piece them together and kind of dissect what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Like where does this piece fit or where does that piece fit? So, and people look at the news, and they don't even half the time they don't even question it. So,
yeah, but the whole Craigslist thing, like it would take you 10, maybe 30 seconds to look that up and just see if there were crisis actors, right? Like, why would they? I don't know. It just seems kind of.
Well, I think, Greg, the point is that they never give away the location or what event it's for, and those people who accept and take it have got to sign the waiver that they can't talk about what they're doing, and so there's your hush money right there, because they can't legally talk about the event that they went to. So it's a great way to get people in with plausible deniability, but also keep them quiet. They can't, if you went and did that event, you can't come now back to your family and friends and say, hey, I got paid for it. I think it was all set up, because now they've got you hooked.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, confidentiality agreement.
Yep. So
I would be curious as to how much money these people are paid per event or per crisis that they partake in. I would be curious as to how much money it is. People are pretty attached to money these days. I couldn't imagine that it would. I don't want to throw any figures out there, just because I don't know. I couldn't imagine that if they're paying $5,000 or $6,000, $7,000 or some figure like that. I just don't know how that could be enough to keep people quiet. Now if you're talking up into the high double digits, you start getting into the six figures. I think that would be an incentive enough for people to keep quiet about it. But what is the likeness that people are making that much money doing this?
$7,000 per crisis is not bad. As
how much?
You're a part of the multiple crisis, right?
The ad I saw was for $20 to $25 an hour for a position like this. Now, I'm not saying that's what they're getting paid, but that's what the advertised rate is.
Okay.
What it falls under the radar as far as if they were advertising this for $7,000-$10,000, it would certainly raise suspicion, I think. But the ones I've seen are $20 to $25 an hour for their help as being they're thinking that they're considered basically an extra in some shooting or some like a film shooting or a event or some concert or something, you know, a protest or a rally or something is kind of what they make them out to be as well.
Right. Yeah. You know, going back to the election, I remember prior to the election, some of those seat fillers at the DNC were getting paid like $15 an hour. I mean, I've seen, like you're saying, up to about $25 an hour. And then if you're going to, like Antifa, if you're going to be an active participant, meaning you're going to, you know, break the window of a B of A or a Starbucks, you know, you're going to get a $50 bonus for that.
Yeah, here
I would just be curious what the real sum of money is once you're able to get into one of those things. And you know, at this point, with the amount of people, and it's obviously not nearly enough people, because people are still pretty stupid to the fact that, you know, what our government is doing, it's right in front of our face, and nobody they either are too scared to admit it or they're too dumb to notice. But I'm surprised that somebody hasn't been able to break into or infiltrate these types of groups and try to figure out exactly what's happening. And, you know, if I ever had an opportunity to break into something like that, and it was a government operation to pass legislation and to hurt people, there's no amount of money that could keep me quiet. So I'm just wondering what's discussed once you respond to this ad, and if you come in and they say, well, it's not $25 an hour, it's a large sum of money, but you have to sign this confidentiality agreement, and you know, I don't care if you're giving me $100,000 or $100 million. If you know, if it's wrong, I'm gonna null and void that agreement that I signed, because it's not right.
And that's right, and that's probably why they would not hire you. They would not take you on.
Yeah, they would hire the sheep, I think, and you would get picked out right away as someone asking either too many questions or something, I think, off the beginning. But here's the ad for the Vegas. It says, fun, engaging acting work in Las Vegas, $20 an hour. It's a company called Crowds on Demand, an LA-based public relations firm specializing in innovative events. It's looking for enthusiastic participants in the Las Vegas area. Our events include everything from rallies to protests to corporate PR stunts. We're looking for enthusiasm and a can-do spirit. Pay will be $15 to $20 per hour, plus reimbursements for gasoline, parking, and transit. And they're basically saying, are you over 21 years of age? Alcohol is present at some of our events. And are you okay with participating in peaceful protests? You know, optional things like that. So when you see these events, and I'm even thinking back of these rallies like in Charlottesville, when you get some of these things going on, a lot of these are filled with people like this just using up space to make it look like these crowds are filling up. But this Vegas one, here it is. I will put it on my Facebook page later. Now, currently, it says on the page not found if you try to go to it right now.
What's the posted date?
Yeah, I was gonna.
I'm on the and it just shows 15 days ago. It was placed. It was placed in mid. It looks like it was placed in mid-August. The date for this. Well, that was a different one. I think that's a Craigslist one, and the Craigslist one is no longer there right now.
Right.
But that would make sense because the event is over. So when an event is done.
You mentioned advertising other places. I did see the same ad in like a local. It was like a local magazine for actors or for people that live within Vegas.
Yeah, so that could be. This was an article I found in the veteranstoday.com website. It shows that Crowds on Demand did actually recruit crisis actors for Las Vegas. Now, that's not saying that they were used in this event, but it just does say that type of thing exists, and that's what we need to try to tell people on the outside, because they think that there's no such thing as crisis actors at all.
So this company is called Crowds on Demand?
Crowds on Demand is, yep, you can look that up, and they place ads like this. Okay. And that could be a CIA front company for all we know. Who knows?
And many other companies like that. I think Rent a Crowd is another one.
I've seen Craigslist ads here a lot in the last few months. Just up until about 3 weeks ago, I was unemployed, and I was looking for work, and I saw these ads for crowdsourcing and be an extra in this film or be an extra in this commercial or whatever it is. I've seen a lot of those, but from what I understand, it's not coming from a big company. It's coming from something a little smaller. But again, that could be, like Dan said, a CIA front.
I just want to go back. So Ben, if you did you see this in a local paper in that area?
Yeah, well, I was on the web and I found I think it might have been a PDF of a page of a local. Strikes me as it was a magazine. That would be that's a local talent would pick up. Because of course in Vegas you got everything. You got showgirls, you've got magicians, you got everybody.
Right, and then Rob, you saw this kind of a similar thing, because I've seen a lot of those things where you can just be in some film or whatever and just stand in the background. From
time to time, Humboldt County is a little smaller than where you guys are from. Being in I think Greg, you're in the Bay Area, and someone's from Sacramento. Humboldt County is a lot smaller. There's only 200,000 people up here, but I have seen in the past couple months 2 or 3 ads for crowdsourcing, and they're not very specific, and there's no posted pay. When it says compensation, it says contract, so I'm assuming they give you a 1099, and it's your responsibility to take taxes out later. I have seen a few of those. I could go back in the Humboldt County Craigslist and look. I'm not sure if they're there anymore. It's usually in the gig section, not in the jobs, but in the gig section. I see a lot of that type of thing. So, if I find anything, I'll make sure I tag you guys so you can look at it.
Right on. And then Dan,
because what am I about 5 hours north of both of you?
Right.
6 hours.
Depending on how fast you drive, yes.
Right.
Well, you're state of Jefferson distance away, so that's good. That's good, actually, to be away from the Bay Area, or the belly of the beast, as it's called.
Right. It sure is.
Right. Right. And Humboldt's pretty secluded, so it's they call it the Redwood Curtain. It's pretty hidden and pretty rural for the most part. Eureka's gotten bigger, but it's not a metropolitan area. So and I don't even live in Eureka. I live about 20 minutes south.
When I was in Vegas last week, I happened to go over to Trump Tower, and I got to talk with Matt, one of the bellmen there. The guy was just nice as could be, man, and he kind of gave me a 10-minute rundown on how things have been since Trump became president. So that was kind of fun. And then I'll just give you a different sort of story regarding that. So I go in and I buy a couple of souvenirs for my friends in his little pro shop / gift store there. And I'm like 2 cents short on tax, so I'm about ready to reach in my pocket a little deeper to grab 2 cents, 2 pennies out of the bottom of my pocket. And the little sales lady, she winks at me and she says, "Listen," she goes, "don't worry about it. Mr. Trump's got it. He can afford it." And the ironic part for that was that was the day he announced his tax plan.
Huh.
That's great. So Trump actually helped you cover your own costs.
He covered my tax that day, yeah, partly.
He covered your... That's awesome.
That's pretty good. I have another question that just came up. I think it was just yesterday that, and that came from the media, some speculative, but they said that at Mandalay Bay, Stephen Paddock's card, his guest card, it was confusing because they found that he checked into the parking lot, I think, one day. At the same time, the card shows that he was making a purchase or doing something in the hotel at the exact same time. Have you guys heard that one too? There was conflicting stories with the guest card. So which means obviously, he was, 2 cards were given when he checked in, I think, with his girlfriend, but were they used simultaneously, either exiting or coming into the parking or the valet, or swiping to get into his room, or ordering or something? But there were simultaneous transactions that couldn't have been done by the same person. Have you heard that?
If those transactions are legitimate and they're both done at the same time, then Stephen Paddock had somebody else with him. If that was after the 25th, when his girlfriend would have been out of country, then there was somebody else other than her with him at this time. And again, I go back to the police audio saying that there was a shooter on the 29th floor. That leads me to believe that maybe the person who was with him was the one that killed him.
Correct. And that goes back to that receipt, too, for room service. After the girlfriend left on the 25th, he had dinner with someone on the 27th. And so right there, I would think that the media would be jumping all over this, and the law enforcement, too. But we know there's a cover-up of some sort going on. We just don't know how, what, or why.
Now, I would like to know if maybe this individual, Mr. Paddock, had at some point when he worked for Boeing come across some information. I don't know when the last time he worked for Boeing was, or if he was still kind of, and I would assume with the amount of money he had, that he may have still been in the know, but maybe he found out something that he shouldn't have known. And he was, like we said, the patsy, somebody that wasn't even involved at all.
That could be. Yep, that could be.
Well, did he also work for Lockheed Martin? For some reason, Lockheed Martin comes to mind.
I think a couple
I've
years.
I've only seen Boeing.
I think in the early 80s he worked for 2 years as an internal auditor, and that's what raised some suspicions as well. Suspicions being the fact that he worked in accounting for a Department of Defense company like that, that large, that something else was going on. But that also spawned other, I would call it, conspiracy theories, because when people started looking into his assets, he owned 2 planes at one point, 2 single-engine Cessna, airplanes. He was a pilot, so that didn't make sense. And people thought, was he, a gun runner? Was he running guns, drugs, kind of a la Barry Seal type of thing? But I looked up his records, and his FAA license expired in 2010, so he may have been doing something like that, in the 80s and 90s, but not in the 2000s. It seems that he wasn't. But he certainly has connections to intelligence and CIA. But I don't know if those things were true or not. But he does have some red flags that come up.
See, and somebody else brought something up that that he may have been a gun runner for the ATF during Fast and Furious. I haven't seen anything other than somebody raise that question, but that may hold some truth to it.
Yeah, I've heard that as well, and he was in the the gun trade and stuff, because he didn't have any really reliable income. He was always just said to have been a gambler. He never really held a job, and people were saying, I've read on some forums too, that he was in intelligence or even the mob, but being able to launder money, being able to gamble money that was dirty in the first place to avoid having to do anything with it. So that was kind of his cover job as a gambler, because it showed, at Mandalay Bay that he was a lifetime platinum member, I think, at Mandalay Bay. So, he was a regular at the high stakes area.
Hey, Dan, can you maybe check with any sources to make sure there's no tie between this guy and Philip Marshall and whatever he was involved in?
I looked into that myself. I didn't check with anyone else, but after I saw his flight records and his airplanes and stuff like that, it didn't. I wouldn't think so, but it's a good question. Philip Marshall, was killed along with his two teenage children in 2013 in California, and he had connections to Barry Seal and the CIA, and was looking into 9/11 when his family's bodies were found with single gunshot wounds to their heads. They called that also a crazed suicide gunman who killed his family, then turned the gun on himself, which we found out later was not the case, so that was a triple homicide. But I don't know, but it certainly was interesting because he owned two planes, not at the same time, and then sold them off at different times, and that was last in 2010. So that's old news, but it's also very interesting because of his background. His girlfriend raised enough suspicions there to warrant a whole discussion broadcast in itself with this Mary Lou Danley, who lived in the Philippines in the 70s, was active in politics, but came over with the immigration papers signed off on by a top-level CIA person here in the U.S. Signed off and actually wrote her character recommendation to come into the U.S. was a person working in the CIA in the Middle East, I think it was Southeast Asia, and so it's a top-level CIA operative who was a four-star general in the U.S. Army, now signing off on a character recommendation to bring in some, immigration papers to a woman who was a Thai fighter at one time in the ring, prize fighter, and a potential spy, was very active in politics, and now she somehow gets into this deal mixed in with what's his name here, Mr. Stephen Paddock, which raises all sorts of flags.
Yep.
And her real name was, I'm not sure, I don't have what her real name is or so, but that seems to be an alias as well, what her past is, because she also doesn't really have a past of anything to note that seems legit. It seems like a cover. People who looked up her says her LinkedIn account on LinkedIn shows that she works in the gambling industry as a hostess. Well, those in gambling and at casinos, they're known as gaming. A gaming hostess, you're working in the gaming industry. You would never refer yourself as working in the gambling industry. So it seems like her LinkedIn account was set up and maintained by someone other than her. So her stuff is very suspect as well, and her background. So what Stephen Paddock got into, we don't know, but it's all very strange. How about his brother's interview on television? What do you think of the brother, Paddock?
Crisis acting.
It felt real to me. I know there's a lot of other people might feel differently, so I'd like to hear that view.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Greg. I didn't hear what you said. What did you say about the interview? What was your impression of it?
It felt real to me. I mean, it felt like if I had just learned that my brother had done something like this, I might have said the same stuff, basically.
Right, and I kind of feel the same way. I felt what this individual said was genuine and authentic, not something that was written on a script and he was told how to act. It's just that felt real to me as well.
His brother Eric says his quote was, "I'm 100% convinced that he did this." 100% convinced. So, and he acted alone. He said that, I think the words were 100% he acted alone. Now, why would he say that on an interview like that? It just seemed odd, I think, and it raised some red flags.
Yeah, I agree. He said that like 3 times. He acted alone. He acted alone. He acted alone. And now I think the guy's an actor. He's a good actor, as they go. But I think he's an actor. And then I think there's also symbolism with him and his red shorts and in his red car next to him. And I think it's all it's just part of the game.
Did anyone research the shirt he was wearing? Eric Paddock's shirt, Orlando Community Art Theater Group.
No, tell us.
I did.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben. Let us know what you think. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that ties that. I'm glad you reminded me. Let me think how that worked now. That went to a theater group in Florida. The person on that board of that theater group, what is her name?
Her name is Sarah Brady.
Okay, you got it. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sarah Brady, and she works for a company called Sarah Brady Public Relations Inc., which is a crisis management PR firm in Florida, and she serves on the board. On their front page, it says, "We've covered such large events for our company, including the Orlando nightclub Pulse shooting." So that brings up multiple flags. Why he would be wearing that shirt on a nationally televised interview? Why would he put on a theater shirt? I think it's one of those things where they're shoving it right in our face when they put obvious things like that on the camera. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Well, because they know most people, like you just said, 99% of the people out there are just cheap and distracted and fluoride filled and all the rest of it.
Hey guys, I don't mean to interrupt. I got to get my kids in bed, so I'm going to sign off here. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Robert.
Thank you, brother.
You guys have a good night. Bye-bye.
All right, so I'm looking at one of the photos. Okay. So the brother only talked to the press once, right?
I think
or maybe
twice.
Once for sure that everyone saw.
Okay, because it seems like what you guys are saying is maybe I missed something, or what I saw was.
Look at the black T-shirt.
It was an edited.
That was the first interview, and then he did another interview where he was standing in front of his front door, next to his red car. He's wearing red shorts as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at photos of that. I've only seen the first one, and so I'm going to have to go and see the second one, because just by the first one, it sounded like he didn't know what the heck was going on. So how does he not know what is going on? And he's saying this wasn't, he wasn't a part of any group, he wasn't a part of anything, blah, blah, blah. Is he changing his story in this second video? That's what I'm wondering. I have to look at that.
I think from what I've read, it seemed an odd. Some of the comments in it seemed odd the way his his behavior was. Finding out his own brother was the new leader in the U.S. mass murder history, broke the record for slayings, and he's kind of just not laughing it off, but just. I don't know. It just seemed odd that he wasn't really in communication for 10 years, but then he got off the phone with them, he said, last week, and then they're helping him out with money, and then he doesn't really know what he does, but yet they're kind of close. So it seemed to ramble. The dialogue seemed to kind of bounce around, I think.
Well, back to that though, how many ambulances have you seen? I think I counted 4.
Yeah, actually, I didn't see any. Maybe one.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't see any.
How do you transport 573 injured with 4 ambulances?
Yeah, that was odd, too.
Yeah, only if they were dispatched to other places, which also is the big key, because there's no way that it should have taken police 74 minutes. And really, if the shooting only lasted less than 10 minutes, they had to have been somewhere else. I just don't understand that either. So I'm waiting to hear for them how they.
Here you go, Greg. I'll pull up the dispatch while you guys can keep chatting. I'm going to look at that because it does show the time frame of when the calls came, and I do believe that there was distraction going on.
Yes. To
keep people all a state of confusion, much like the morning of the events on 9/11 in the FAA towers radar. Everything was confused by these ongoing practice runs and false flags and also reality, and that's where people got mixed up. And I see a lot of that going on with this event.
Yep.
A lot of confusion.
Like the same
I'll pull it up here.
Okay. Yeah, because this started at 10:08 is when they first got reports of shots being fired. That doesn't mean that shots were actually fired at 10:08. It could have happened a little bit before that.
Here we go. I've got it. Sorry to interrupt, but there was an active shooter first at the Tropicana Hotel, and I think if units were on the scene for that, it only was 3 minutes later when there was an active shooter at the Bellagio. And at that time, they had the facility locked down and multiple strike teams were deployed. And then it was only 2 minutes later that there was an active shooter at the New York Hotel with also multiple strike teams working and unknown injuries at the hotel. So there was injuries already there. And then it was 13 minutes later where they got a call for a device in an Acura SUV at the Luxor where wires were sticking out of a vehicle, and they were setting up a perimeter at that point. And I think all that was taking place before the, quote, suspect was neutralized at Mandalay Bay 32nd floor with a possible second suspect inside, it said, and they were at the time evacuating the hotel. So regardless of police presence and ambulance presence, there should have been, they may have been stretched very thin at all these other locations, is why we may not have seen them. But I don't want to commit to saying that either. It was certainly odd, though. Oh, the other thing I was going to bring up here before I forgot that right now at Mandalay Bay, employees say that there's nothing on the point of sale system in the system or even the reservation system at Mandalay Bay that shows Stephen Paddock at all. Everything was stripped and everything was removed. It's been deleted. And that may be for investigative purposes, but employees found that odd. I think when they started, it came about the day that the receipt came out that he was having dinner with another guest on the 27th. Later that afternoon, the employees said, no, we can't even access his stuff. It all got wiped out on the servers. And that is also, I think, even if it was done for investigative purposes, they wouldn't have removed it. They would have taken a copy of it to look. Well, and they said they wouldn't have removed it altogether. But now I'm just saying, too, that devil's advocate, they may have hidden it, may not have made it accessible, but all his stuff was wiped off on the reservation system.
Yeah, and they might have taken it just so that it can't be leaked or whatever.
That could have been, too. That could have been too much was being leaked, let's get rid of it. And that could have been very well. It also shows here Paddock was a lifetime, quote, platinum member at Mandalay Bay. And then someone mentioned there that there's no such thing as a lifetime at the casinos. And correct me if I'm wrong, but at the casinos you still have to re-up every year or renew your membership. There's no such thing as a lifetime. But the quote in one of the mainstream media, I believe, that he was a lifetime member at Mandalay Bay. So yes, he was there. He was known, and people did know of him at that location.
Which also makes it weird because, yeah. Well, I mean, so if shots are fired at, or if the first reports come in at 10:08, that the shots are fired, but then at 10:25, we hear that one of the dispatcher quotes is he shot down the hallway and hit a security guard. So we're talking about 25 minutes later. How long? If the shooting only happened for 10 minutes, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Greg. The other thing I have is it sounds like the person staying in the room beneath his suite on room 30, floor 31, had called into security when the shooting began. Now, this could be also a red herring if there was no shooting taking place there at all. But allegedly, and here's where I'm getting at the point with the media, is that if he heard the shooting at 10 o'clock or 10:18 or whatever it was, and it asked for security, it still doesn't explain why there's a 60 or 70-minute delay with the security guard getting up there. I also think, personally, that when those windows were knocked out, if they were, according to the official narrative, the loud glass breaking on the floor, on the ground at the hotel, and those are, I think, 800-pound windows, that would have aroused some suspicion, and someone else would have been calling security for that, which would have taken place shortly before the shooting. So you still would have had 60 minutes of no police presence, no security presence at all investigating this. And that's the question. What took so long for security to get up there? One report said that he was shot down the hallway in the leg. The other one I heard was shot through the door because they were watching him through the peephole, and he was shot that way. So which is it, in front of the door or down the hallway, or both? You know, so the other thing that I heard, and I'll wrap up here in a second, is that the security was called onto the 32nd floor because someone noticed in security that the alarm or the security cameras were dismantled or taken apart or disengaged, and that raised some flag on the system, and that security officer went up there to simply check it out and ended up getting shot. So I think some of those are maybe real, fake, red herrings, or disinformation. What do you think on that, Ben? If they were to disengage the CCTV, would that raise a
they do have tamper switches on them. Some of them, not all of them. Some of them do. So yeah, that would certainly be alarm down in the control panel.
And that would be done right away, though. That wouldn't take 60 minutes for someone to get up there. It says 70 minutes later.
Yeah, exactly, man. When oh my God, so you touch a camera in a casino, man, they're on you within seconds.
Or fiddling with the fire alarm, smoke detector. You're fiddling with that. That's gonna, yeah.
Exactly.
So we've got multiple things here that, and I think these are all fair questions for the media and law enforcement that I don't believe are being asked, or being looked into. There's a 70-minute delay from anything even going on, which leads to the fact that maybe there wasn't any shooting on the 32nd floor at all. I mean, there would have been, I think the person on the 33rd and the 34th floor would have called in if they would have heard shooting beneath them. I know those rooms are probably somewhat soundproof, but that is a loud machine gun running off on an automatic fire like that would have certainly alarmed a lot of people. Now, I realize, too, in Vegas, a lot of people don't spend time in their hotel rooms, per se. They're out gambling, so that would also lead one to believe there wouldn't be a lot of calls coming in from the neighboring rooms because of the noise. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it makes sense. People are certainly out all night in Vegas, but I mean, with all those rooms around there, and that's going to echo down the hallway and all the rest of it. You're going to have at least, I mean, how many rooms do you have on a floor? About 30? It varies, of course, but I'm going to just guess you have 30 rooms on a floor that size. So I would think, you're going to have at least 10 of those rooms occupied.
Correct. Even using that simple conservative math, there's going to be other phone calls being made to security for, disturbing strange noises or, commotion going on, regardless of what it is. That smoke's going to fill the hallway, I think, too, with all the firing of the weapons going on. That's going to really stink, and that's going to stink up that whole floor, I'd imagine, with that gun.
Sure.
Yeah, there was, I think, one of the press conferences from the sheriff's office that I saw. They did say that, and it didn't make sense to me, and so I need to really look at this more. But he was saying that the reason why the security guard came up there is because this person had tripped off a alarm for a door. So I don't know what that meant.
And I think the good thing there is we can get this information from Ben once again, is any kind of tripping of an alarm or a system or something being fudged or finagled with is going to draw a quick response. Even, I would say, a slow response would be 5 or 10 minutes. It certainly wouldn't be 70 minutes.
Oh yeah, no. An alarm like that gets immediate response by more than one. I would think more than one guard as well. He's going to want backup.
Well, okay, because if this guard was shot at 10:20:25, then worst case, they got reports at 10:08. So the guard seemed to have responded fairly quickly if he was shot, right? So, and then that could also show that that could be why in the press conference that I saw last night that the police think that this guy was not planning on killing himself there, that he was actually planning on leaving. And they never said why, but they made it very clear that they had some type of information that told them that this guy was not planning on staying there. He was planning on leaving. That's a huge, huge point, too, that I think, we need to make sure that we also talk about.
So Paddock was going to be committing the crime and then also fleeing?
Correct. That's what the police think. They have, and they haven't said what that is, but they have some reason that leads them to think that. And they make it sound like this is going to be a big, big deal. It's this huge buildup to where they're going to come out and tell us everything. I don't think they're ever going to find a motive, but
and now media also reported a couple days ago that this Stephen Paddock was researching hotels in Chicago for the Lollapalooza event to stay at a high-end, top-level floor at a hotel in Chicago overlooking this event for a possible shooting site, which I think is disinformation. And some other sites. I think that's all I think that's mainstream media BS. But it's going to help sell the story in the end. The average sheeple person is going to say, "Yep, that does make sense. The guy's a nut job."
Yeah. Well, here I'll go back to. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, since you've been there, is it possible, and I guess this would just be a quick call to Mandalay Bay, are there any windows in that building, in those 42 floors, are there any windows that that you wouldn't have to necessarily bust into? Are there any windows that you could just slide?
Windows that open?
Windows that open on any floor.
I've got a potential on that, but I would ask Ben. He was there, so I would ask him first.
Yeah, I didn't stay in. Now, keep in mind, when I went to Mandalay, I was there for a conference, so I only walked through the casino and the shops, and then I spent time in the conference center. So I've never stayed in a room there, but that is a newer hotel, and I know that staying in other newer hotels on the Strip in the past, they stopped. Most hotels you can't open the windows anymore. That's kind of something they used to do in the 80s and 70s and 80s. But most hotels, because of air balance and everything of the air conditioning system, and they don't even allow you to open the windows at all.
From what I've heard, this is Dan. What I've heard on that hotel, I think floors 2 through 7 potentially open, but nothing above 7 open at all. There's no way to get them even open. So the question that I had is if there was firing on floors 15 or 12 or 9, where's those broken windows? We've seen some, but there's going to be a lot of broken windows because you can't fire out of those. Now, it does explain floor 4, if those windows do open beneath floor 7, where we saw the strobe light on floor 4, there would not have necessarily been a broken window, but it could have been a gunman just firing out of the open window, which that is now plausible. But the other windows in the middle would have had to have been broken out because you can't fire out. Those windows are all locked up. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that would make sense. But, I mean, going back to the muzzle flash, wouldn't you have a larger muzzle flash? And too bad I didn't ask Rob this, but I would expect a pretty dramatic muzzle flash, even with a flash arrestor.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen some of those questions asked and answered on different forums on this case too, and that's the same thing everyone asked. If you'd see a large burst, or you'd see blast coming from, and all those people holding up their cell phones at the concert that have that hotel room in view, that whole 32nd floor, you'd see some kind of images coming from active shooting coming from there. So, but I don't know the answer officially, but I would think it was. And the only thing you can see on that other hotel I mentioned earlier at the Delano, you can see a light on during the shooting on that hotel, and it's off when there's no shooting. Now, I'm not saying it's a gun burst or gun flash, but all I know is that in the video footage of that Delano Hotel right behind Mandalay Bay is that there is a light on the top floors, close to the top floors, that are on during some of the shooting, and it's off when there's no shooting. And so I think the investigation needs to look at who was in that, who was occupying those floors or even on top of the building there, potentially raining down all the gunfire. Maybe there had been nothing coming from the Mandalay Bay, and the windows were broke out as far as the staging of the room. Hey, there's another thing, Ben, I was going to bring up to you, Ben, because you were there, that Stephen Paddock, made a lawsuit against Mandalay Bay back in 2011. Remember when he slipped and fell at the Cosmopolitan? Well, maybe it was at the Cosmopolitan, at the hotel, or maybe that's a restaurant. Back on October 30th of 2011, Stephen Paddock filed a lawsuit for liquids not being cleaned up on the floor as he slipped and fell and sustained some injuries. And I think that lawsuit that we tried to get collect damages from that lawsuit, just was, someone said that was just finalized here weeks ago, and he was going to lose some money, and that's why he did this. He wasn't going to win the lawsuit. Now, a case like that would not take 6 years, would it?
Yeah, I wouldn't think. And then why would he lose if he's suing? I mean, if he loses, typically you get an ambulance chasing lawyer, right? So the lawyer's going to get 33%, and he wouldn't, unless they're countersuing him for something. Why would he lose money?
That's what I didn't get, and I didn't think the case would have taken that long. Now the case is factual. It did take place. I've seen the YouTube videos on some of his surveillance on Stephen Paddock back in 2011 on that lawsuit case where he slipped and fell. That does exist, and that is out there. So the case is real. I can't believe a case like that would last that long, but I think that was used probably as a ploy by mainstream media to fit the narrative that it finished up and he was distraught about that. And then he also lost some big winnings over the weekend, and his girlfriend flew off to the Philippines, possibly in a breakup, and that's what led him to do all this. So I think it's more fodder for the media, but just wanted to throw that out there that did actually happen, that he did file a lawsuit for slipping and falling at the Cosmopolitan back in October of 2011.
Right, and he asked for $100,000.
Okay.
Which is also
when that came due? Do you know when that was finalized?
No, I'm just reading some of the reports here. Fox News report that's talking about that, where he reportedly asked for $100,000, and that's just kind of weird that he would ask for that, and that's the same amount that he sent to his girlfriend, and it says
same exact amount. Yeah.
Same exact amount. And he incurred $32,000 worth of damage. So, and then he.
So worst case, he would have been out for $32,000.
Right.
Do you know when that was?
If they counter, I see. Because his damages, what would those be? Medical bills?
Yeah. It's kind of weird. It's just an odd number.
Well, 32 again. There you go, right?
Right. Right. I mean, for pain and suffering.
So would that be enough to drive someone to do this? I think that's another weak example of someone painting someone as a lone wolf.
We would need to also talk with the lawyer for that. But it says the case was eventually tossed out in 2014. And still owed $270 in legal fees. All
right, so that's bogus. That certainly was not.
Yeah,
not the case.
Yeah, well, and here again, I think this whole Paddock thing, he's just the fall guy of the patsy, whatever you want to call him. He's the red herring to keep us off the trail, which I believe goes right to Trump. I think the trail goes right to Trump and Homeland Security and the Mossad and the Jewish mafia that runs Vegas and Adelson, because see, here's the other thing. Trump evidently had a this meeting with Adelson and some of the other casino owners, he had this on his agenda prior to this event. So he was going to go meet with them anyway, and then, well, now that he's there, he has the meeting, and he can go to the hospital and cry, and then Melania can shed a few tears and take a few pictures too. So you see the setup. Anybody there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah,
Okay.
timing sounds very, very strange, and that's the biggest thing is that when we are talking about Trump, because one of the first things as a wrestling fan, obviously I was trying to figure out, okay, how far away is the Mandalay Bay from Trump Plaza? It's not.
It's about
far.
Yeah.
It's not too close.
No, it's not far. No, it might be a half mile.
Right. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's crazy. And then, Trump obviously he has a lot of ties there. So, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out, what's going on in Las Vegas and all that area as far as the mafia. And the mafia is dead, I guess, after John Gotti got, sent to prison. It was like, everybody, we all thought the mafia was gone, but no.
Yeah.
This thing still moves.
They just became. Yeah, I mean, I've heard, I don't know, I don't have exact evidence, but I've heard that that the mafia just transitioned into the FBI. They became legit.
Yeah, I think it's. I agree with that. The FBI and the CIA, and I mean, this is all getting as bottom as it gets. I mean, they're corrupt down to the core now. So it's all melding together.
Yeah, like what do we have any idea of what this guy's view was on September 11th, on John F. Kennedy, on all that? Are we hearing a lot of that?
Remember what the neighbor said, that he didn't talk too much about politics or anything, and he liked to just he'd drink beer and play poker. He said, and that's the neighbor when he said, the neighbor says there's no way that he did this because he's just a nice guy, easygoing guy, didn't have any views extreme on either side. But the media is where you start painting this extreme scenario of this lone gunman, which I think is that narrative. Once again, they're trying to blame it all on him. He's the bad guy.
So is this the neighbor that said that he saw Paddock in a Trump shirt or something like that?
This was the Marine, the neighbor who's a Marine.
Okay.
And he did the interview with. This may have been on the. Let's see, what show was it? It was not mainstream.
Was it on Michael Savage?
I think it was the Michael Savage show.
Yeah, I've seen a couple good things on Savage, and I'm not a big Michael Savage fan, but
he had some witnesses on there too that said multiple gunshots. They guaranteed it, and some were on the ground. So his show, whether you like, I'm not a Michael Savage fan myself, but whether you like the show or not, he had a couple guests on this week that were, I think, very important to this case because they were. This neighbor who was a Marine says no, he never. This is not him. It was a setup. It was a total setup. He didn't buy this for a minute. And then the women saying that the multiple gunshots. How about? Did you guys hear anything about the? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I've got here also an active shooter at the Motel 6. And also on the 4th floor, the police incident report said there's a suspect with a backpack on the 4th floor. So there was a lot of stuff going on at the Motel 6 as well during all this.
Right. And if you look at a map, you'll kind of see that all of this kind of, makes it very hard for police to respond to everything.
Yeah, the other thing is, are these calls for active shooters at these hotels? Were they just hearing the sounds, gunshots coming from Mandalay Bay and thought they were from their own hotel? or were there shots?
Hard to believe.
I think it was the other one that was I think the Bellagio, where there was gunfire in the Bellagio and injured people in the Bellagio lobby. That's, I think, where the office manager was hit and injured, and that's a good one because that had nothing to do with the concert, had nothing to do with outside, nothing to do with getting hit by a shooter from the 32nd floor.
Right.
And so that's another key piece of this case too. There were injuries sustained in the lobby of some of these hotels. So there was gunfire going on multiple locations.
Right, and there's no way that Stephen Paddock could have been at all of these places.
And correct.
So,
any one of those proven true eliminates Stephen Paddock from doing that. So now we've got multiple. Now we've got a conspiracy. We've got more than one person.
Right, but from what the cops have said, because they've been so critical of any conspiracy theory, but even if what they're looking at now is not necessarily somebody who was in the room with him, but somebody that was helping him, that also is a conspiracy. So
correct.
I don't like when they try to label that name and say, well, a conspiracy means that he didn't do it. No, that's not what it means. It means that there were multiple people, there were multiple shooters. I think there's no doubt that there were multiple shooters. I have no doubt that there were multiple shooters. And I wasn't there. So
correct.
There's people who were there that will say, no, there weren't because of this and that. But we're not hearing a lot of people that are coming out and saying, you know what, all of the shots were coming from this building. We're not hearing that.
Yeah, and then we've got the other. Remember back to that weapon, that bomb placed in that Audi found in the car at the Luxor? The police report said that it includes the suspects they're looking for was 3 Asian males and 1 white male with a beard is who they were looking for that fled the scene of that car bomb. That we haven't heard from day one. They haven't heard that from day one.
No, that I've never heard. So that came from where? From the...
That was on the police reports and the police scanner as well. And the reports that first came out was that was part of those shooting incidences at the other hotels, which I think people thought at first were distractions or were made up or were fake stories to get people to be distracted. But that bomb did exist because they did either detonate it or remove it safely, but it took authorities an hour to do so. So that was not a fake deal. That certainly happened because they also had the suspect's name that says right here, 3 Asian males and 1 white male with a beard.
Right, and then even if those were fake stories, whatever, if somebody reported all of these fake stories, like at the Motel 6, that still shows planning. That still shows that this was a calculated thing. This was a planned thing, and possibly not just by one person, unless they can trace Stephen Paddock's phones to calling fake calls into 911, then somebody else was.
Correct. Interesting.
Well, here again, like that Robert Steele, that ex-CIA guy, you can look him up. I guess he's got a pretty popular page on YouTube and elsewhere. But like he was saying, he's calling this event kind of a hybrid false flag, where you had training. You had training going on. You had some Mossad agents there doing their dirty deeds, and then of course you had Paddock to be there as the patsy. So some of these other shots in Motel 6. It's kind of funny. Motel 6 might. I mean, there's always crazy shit going on at Motel 6. You know that, but.
But
with all
the light on for you, so
that's why they leave it on, yeah. So I don't know, that a lot. He speculated that that some of these other shots could have just been people that were part of the drill. And then they just kind of went off a little bit and said, "Well, man, I want to kind of have a part of this." So then they fire off their blanks and they make a name for themselves. go a little rogue, I guess, is what he was saying.
Oh, that's an interesting.
Yeah, that
so
could make
sense. His name is what? What's his name? Robert Steele?
Steele, Robert Steele, yeah, he's an ex-CIA guy. He's got an interesting take on it. Some of what he said made a lot of sense.
The other thing that there was for the listeners out there, I'm not sure if you guys know about this or not. You know, he did say they said Stephen Paddock was live streaming this event. That's why he had the camera. He had the two security cameras that were watching or surveilling the hall, one out the peephole and one on that cart outside the hall. But the other one was a camera he was using to live stream the event to somewhere overseas. Now, the question is, who was on the receiving end, who was recording that, and what was it used for? Or is that some kind of take on this whole thing that could be used as a double cross to come down the pipeline down the road? I believe it was probably live streamed somewhere, and someone sitting on that evidence of a video showing of a non-Stephen Paddock doing this, that's holding it over some three-letter alphabet agency to not let get out. So I think you got a double cross probably in the play here in the works also, and it could have been some, like Ben mentioned, a converging of a real event and a false flag kind of getting split in two. And once again, that's the confusion and people not knowing what was really going on. There's a couple things are going on at the same time. So who knows what all that happened, but there was a recording device and a video, recording this.
Yeah, if it was a live stream to some other country or something like that, that should not be hard for them to prove.
And I think that would come out right away, because you'd be able to get that, either the IP address and the networking there of the Ethernet cable he's using, or the wireless connection that he's using, and getting the recipient on the other end where that's being routed to that live stream. And because it's taking so long to come up with the answer on that, we haven't heard anything about that. I personally, that's just my opinion, that someone else is holding on to that video, because if it gets out that Stephen Paddock didn't do this and our own government or someone perhaps did, or some other government did, it's really going to blow the lid. So I think they're holding that video footage over someone's head right now. So someone's been compromised, I think. So it's placing law enforcement in a very predicament situation, I think, as well, whether they're good law enforcement or the black hats in law enforcement, the rogue folks. They're all, I think, in precarious waters here, because something's going on that's much bigger than all this.
Yeah, and even if that video is encrypted to where the police say, well, we don't know what happened, even that shows us something. Even that still leaves some type of a trail.
Correct. Hey, gentlemen, I got to go in about 5 minutes, but I do have one other piece of information here.
Sure.
Back to that, I've been following this lead of the girlfriend, this Mary Lou Danley, and just wanted to finish this off, because I do think she plays a big role in this, and either maybe using Stephen Paddock or using him for something, because he may have been just the unwitting victim of all this, but I think she's has CIA connections as well. Her name came through, of course, as Mary Lou Danley, but was also known as Mary Misa Campo and Mary Lou Ocampo Natividad. So when she came over in 1986, she had 3 names already, and but it shows here that her former background, she was a model and a spy, and she also fought in Thai. She's a Thai fighter and active in politics. So I think she was more than likely recruited somehow, active in CIA for many years. By the time she got here in 86 and married her first husband in 1990, Gary Danley, that's where she got the name from, her last name, Gary Danley. That's where somehow in the middle she got hooked up with recently with Mr. Stephen Paddock. But Mary Lou Danley was married to Gary Danley. They had a daughter named Sheila, I think her name is Sheila Darcy. Darcy married Micah Linton. Micah Linton's father is William Linton, the CEO of Promega Corporation. That's very active in some other defense, I think, electronics defense work. Forensic technology that was used. His company was used to identify a lot of the victims in the 9/11 killings, attacks, the fragments of bodies. He owns a DNA kind of a company, and so they stand to gain something big. But anyway, the family that she's married into and that Mary Lou's relation, her daughter is, we're dealing with high bucks, big bucks here. Well-to-do families in high. She was, I think, potentially placed into this scene to make somehow Paddock was some unwitting victim of something that was much larger than he ever imagined. But anyway, that's the connection on that.
She was a handler.
I think she could have been a handler of some sort of him, unwitting or not. But that's why I think it was very convenient that she was flown out of the country, got wired the money, did a little quick interview here with the news, and was quickly ruled off a suspect list because she's involved, I think, high up. Her background does not make sense at all. Back to that LinkedIn account and what her job it really is. She didn't have.
Oh yeah, right. Like she's just basically a high paid whore. There's what they're trying to say. I mean, hostess, whatever you want to call her, but
But I think so. So if she is, and her the last name of the person who did her recommendation paper here, when she came over in 1986, was Mr. Carl W. Ford Jr. He's a four-star general and had ties to Mideast Asia and was in the CIA when he wrote her recommendation letter to get her immigration papers. So basically you get a sponsor, a spook sponsor, to a woman who comes in and really has no noticeable job for many years, gets married, has a kid, in and out of gambling, flying on vacations and flying around the world. That whole area looks suspect, and I think that's probably an area to look into. But I got to cruise here in a few minutes. You guys can certainly stay on the call, but I got to run.
No, I'm going to roll out too. Hey, you ought to do this. So we ought to do this in another week or so after a little more scuttlebutt breaks.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, Ben. Thanks for joining us here. And what we'll do is, I think, Greg, you will wrap this up and then provide the link, I think, tomorrow. And we can share this, too, for others to listen to. Because I think we covered a lot of ground on this 2.5 hours.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
Anyway, hey, friend me out there, BenBlest. So friend me, and then we'll communicate a little bit that way as well.
Cool.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
All right.
Okay.
All right, Greg. Thank you.
Cool. All right. I'm going to stay on the line a little bit longer to see if anybody else wants to join us here or not. We covered a lot of different stuff tonight. So we talk about the Mandalay Bay security team. Their security team, one of the things that we want to know about their security team, obviously, is what were their policies, what were their practices. If there was gunfire, how were they trained to respond? How quickly were they trained to respond? So it seems like this team, not the police, but this Mandalay Bay security team, they were the first ones to really understand where the shooting was coming from. We've heard a lot of the differing views about shootings on the 10th floor, possibly shootings higher up, shootings on the 29th floor. Were any windows open? Were there any floors on this building that had any windows that you could physically open? 1,500.
Hey guys, you still on here? It's Rob.
Yep. Yeah, I'm still here, Rob.
Hey, Hey, so I just discovered something, and I think everybody should probably know. Did anybody notice the tattoo Stephen Paddock had on his Adam's apple, the 13?
I don't know about the 13. I know Dan and Ben had talked about some other tats, but you're saying that he also had one on his neck? Because I've heard this.
It was on his Adam's apple. And it was one of it's probably the most common photo of him that's been floating around. I just discovered this tattoo. That tattoo is not on the dead body in that picture.
All right, I'm gonna look that up.
Are you on Facebook right now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send it to you through Messenger, and you can take a look.
CNW News has something. Had a 13 tattoo on his neck.
I just sent it. I just sent the most common one to you. Now let me find the other one.
Because I've heard this once, but I haven't been able. Oh my goodness. Okay, but is that 13 Braille? Because we've seen many. Okay, so on every this photo that you're showing here has been seen on every national news network. So on those photos, am I going to see this 13 there?
Well, let me see. I'm still on the web page. This came from the Daily Mirror, the Daily Star. Let me scroll through a couple more.
Photos. Okay, here's a photo from 5 days ago. It has the 13 on it.
New York Daily News.
Okay, do we know when he put that on there?
I don't have any information on the tattoo.
Okay, yeah. But no, every photo that I'm seeing, you're right. You can clearly see.
So now I'll send you...
Okay, 13 for us, at least, to me, would mean he was part of the Crips. That's what that would mean to me. So what is that 13?
I don't know.
Okay, let me look at this. So then I'm going to go back and look at the photo that we've all seen of his dead body, and you're right, there's no 13 there. So then the question becomes, is it possible that there was a time between this stock photo that everybody has and the murders that he allegedly did? Is it possible that he had that taken off?
I think if he did, he'd have he'd have a bandage or a scar, or it would look irritated.
So we'd still see it. We'd still see, you're definitely right on that. We'd still see something. I mean, it was a bad tat, first of all. It's like, because I didn't even notice it. I didn't notice it until and I've seen that photo many, many times. I would never, if you wouldn't have said it, I would have never noticed it.
Right? Isn't that? Now you look at the picture of the dead body, there's no tattoo on his neck.
No. Clearly.
Isn't this is getting weird.
That could be the Building 7 right there, man.
Right?
Could be the smoking gun. Okay. That's a huge, huge question. From that 13. Unless they were given a bad photo, but even on the zoomed in one, there's no indication. Okay, so is there any theories about what the 13 means?
I don't know. This is just something that I happened to come across, and and it's on every stock photo that we see of him. That same picture, it's there. But if you go to the pictures where he's, he can tell he's younger, he's got the black hair, and he's not gray, that tattoo's not there.
It's not there, right. Which I'm only seeing one of those. I've only seen one photo from his past. It could be the reason why there's such a lack of photos.
Las Vegas Review-Journal, the picture is there. That was 5 days ago. So, the National Enquirer, that's obviously a tabloid, but, you know, they're using that same stock photo.
Yeah, everybody is. It's all the same photo with that 13, okay? And then that goes back to the whole thing. Well, okay, if he had the 13 here, what does that 13 mean?
Right. Who else is on? Is Dan still on?
No, I think they're all off. I think it's just us. But I'm still recording here, so.
Okay. So yeah, that's something I noticed, and as soon as I saw that, I was thinking, man, I hope they're still on, or I hope somebody's still there, so that this can be in the audio recording that, you know, is going to be posted later.
Right.
What I did do, and I'm sure you noticed, I made, you know, like what we done with the Crowley investigation, I made a closed group about this, and I added some people. Feel free to add whoever you want. I feel the more people, the better.
Okay. Yeah, what is this photo of him in a blue shirt? Have you seen that one? It's in a blue
No.
He's probably talking with Mary Lou. It looks like he's talking with her.
Is he sitting down?
Yeah, he's sitting down, and he's in a blue shirt, and he definitely does not have the 13 there.
Yeah, I see that, and I think that picture is probably still dated.
Okay, what about the mug? Well, the mugshot is the same one that we've all been seeing. That's the one.
Yeah, and you can't really see his neck in that picture.
Okay, that photo from where it shows Stephen Paddock in that blue shirt with that girl.
Right.
Where is that from? Because now I see another one from the same setting, whatever they were filming or recording, with a third person, and there's 3 people here. So he's bypassing his wife. He's talking to somebody else.
I'd have to find it. I'm scrolling through Google Images. I'm sure it will come up at some point.
Ms. Sika, I'm going to send you this link if I can. MissSika.com.
Now, I will point out that I'm still looking at a lot of those stock photos, and he has the tattoo on every single one. So that must be something that was done recently, and if we can find out, I see what you're talking about here. Looks like something that was done recently, and if we could figure out this picture where he's talking to who we would assume is his girlfriend, if we could find out when that picture was taken,
right, then
we can kind of have an idea of when he may have gotten that tattoo.
Right, because now that I'm looking at it, I don't think I think it's possible it came from a video. That's what
the tattoo did?
No, the picture that we see of him in a blue shirt.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like that was just somebody that just snapped off a photo. I think there's a video of him in that blue shirt talking with somebody else and possibly talking.
Oh, I see. I pulled up a picture here where there's just a bunch of people at a table.
Oh, where's that one? I want to see that one.
I'll save it and I'll send it to you right now. It's kind of the same setting as the one you were just looking at. You should have it. You should have it on your Facebook now.
All right, him in that polo.
Yeah, it's that same picture.
All right, let me look at that.
I thought that was just super weird when I noticed there was no tattoo, and then I just happened to look at that picture, and I thought, wait a minute.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, so maybe this is so it's important to understand where this is from and when this is from right here, because this looks closer. If you compare that photo with the other one you have because you have 3 photos there. If you compare that one to the one you have with the 13. and his eyes closed, which I always wonder why, like, that's like the worst picture for them to ever put out.
Right.
Couldn't find a better photo. So
yeah, I know. And there's not, I mean, what we're seeing kind of is being continuously recycled through the news is 3 pictures. And I would like to see more, or 4. There's 4, actually. You got the mug shot. You've got one of him. I think he's in a white T-shirt. He's still got some color in his hair. The one he's sitting down talking to his girlfriend, and then the other one is the one with the 13 on his neck. So, yeah. And people his age generally don't go out and get tattoos.
And not that.
So, yeah. So when you talk about significance of tattoos, there must be some sort of significance behind why a man that age would get that tattoo, but it may not be.
It kind of looks.
It may not be as new as we think, because we can't figure out when all of these pictures were taken.
Well, it almost looks like next to the 1-3, it looks like there's like a 1-9 kind of faded out. I wonder if this is like mascara. Not necessarily.
I'm not sure. Let me look.
Tattoo. It doesn't. To me, it doesn't look like a tattoo. It does look like somebody drew on his neck.
Maybe.
And he was shot. He wasn't shot in the neck. See.
He was shot. It looks like he was shot in the mouth, but
right.
He may have also been shot from behind too. I'm not. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, that one photo. I mean, if I'm looking at your photo there of him being shot, I need to look at mine so I can see the high res. But okay, because yeah, it looks like he shot himself, and it kind of geared more towards the right eye.
Right.
With his right hand, which would make sense. It makes sense why his left hand is still covered in that glove. To me, it doesn't answer why in the high-res photo of the kill shot, why those bullets look like they were there afterwards, or maybe on top. And that could just be because they were spent from somewhere else, and he shot himself here and fell down
right.
there. But I don't know.
And and what Dan had brought up earlier, and what I said, the amount of shots that he fired, I mean, you could almost bathe in all the brass. So the small amount of brass there just doesn't add up. I think if now I'd have to go back and look at, because I got these pictures from when I was in Medford, my girlfriend sent them to me, and I'll have to go back and look at this picture you're looking at of his his midsection and his legs, so that I can still.
Yeah, that 13 looks like it's drawn on. Now you also notice in that same photo with the 13, what I've noticed now that I first thought about from Kurt Haskell brought this up, where he was like, his eyebrows are shaven off. It's almost like when you go to a party and the first person passes out and you draw a penis on his forehead or something like that.
Right.
This photo of him with his eyes closed and the 13 on his neck almost looks like that to me.
Maybe that's what that is then.
I don't know. He looks he's definitely wasted. Why they're only using this photo? I mean, come on. There's no photos of him just in a natural setting. The family didn't give the media a photo that might not make him look like just some bastard drunk or whatever.
Right.
That 13. I'm really glad you brought that up, because somebody else brought that up once, but it just flew over my head. But now you really got me thinking about that. And the more that I think about it, it doesn't look like a tattoo. it looks like writing. It looks like somebody wrote there, sure. And also next to the 13, to the right, if you're looking at the photo, to the right of the 3, it looks like there's a smaller 1-9. It looks like there might be even more writing. But what I would look for that 13, especially, I don't know if you were on when Dan was mentioning about the car bomb, and that the car bomb that was found at another spot, some of the suspects, I believe they were Filipino.
Yeah, I actually caught that when he posted something, and I took it from him and I used it in something.
Okay.
I also did hear something about the scanner footage, or the scanner audio footage. I'm sorry, scanner audio, talking about was it three suspects in fatigues that may have been Asian.
Right, that's it, right there. And then, so are there any Filipino Crip gangs in that area? Is one thing that I would look at.
Well, let me Google that.
And also, because I was wondering, you went back. I think you kind of brought it up, and you brought up the thing about the lady and her husband who walked up to the front of the stage and was telling everybody that they're gonna die, and they were described as short Mexicans, almost like
right.
4 feet, 5 feet. Well, they could have been Filipino people too.
Yeah. I'm not seeing. Oh. Well, this article is about. It's a little over 9 years old. Let's see. Pinoy Real street gang was founded in the early 1980s in Atwater Village, California, located 9 miles northeast of downtown LA. Is a Filipino slang name for a Filipino male. Real used in a Spanish term pronouncing Real, which means royal or king. PR13.
With LA, you said Atwater. That was brought up earlier. I'll have to go back and see exactly when that was brought up, but that location was brought up. It might have been brought up with the crisis, with the Craigslist crisis actors.
Pinoy Real gang has known established sets and cliques throughout Southern California and Las Vegas.
There you go. There it is. So there's
so it makes you. I'll bookmark this for reference, but it makes you wonder. Whether that 13 is a tattoo or it's drawn on, makes you wonder what it really means.
Well, it's got to mean something. And the fact.
Well, and the only thing I can think of is it's that number. It's that PR13, Pinoy Real 13.
Has the media talked about that 13 on his neck? I don't remember anything about that.
I don't think that they have.
It's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Okay. Well, that's a huge thing. That 13 does look like it's drawn on.
Right. But then again, I go back to and I really want people to remember this, is why I'm mentioning it one more time, is the number for that gang, PR13. So I mean, that despite it being drawn on, I'm going to venture to think, because it is a Filipino gang,
mm-hmm.
That it holds some sort of significance.
Sure, and there might be a tie between that and his girlfriend.
Yep.
Yeah, you definitely got something there, man.
Well, I'm glad I noticed it.
Yeah, I am too. Because now I can't even get to that video. They want me to install this crap, and I'm not going to do that.
And for anybody that, if you just on Facebook, if you go up to the search bar, whether you're on your computer, your phone, or tablet, or whatever, if you just type in Las Vegas shooting investigation, there's my group there. It's closed. There was a video, and we've discussed the multiple shooter topic. We touched on that a few times, but a guy did. He downloaded a video, and he did about an 8.5 minute analysis of that, and how people, again, goes back to the echoes theory, and that some of those shots sounded like they were echoing, and then you would hear a close-up shot. I don't know if you've seen that yet. I'll share it to your wall so you can check it out. It's about 8.5 minutes long. Mm-hmm. But that part of Vegas is really wide open, and I don't know how any echoes would occur there.
Well, I mean, the very first video, the very first thing that I saw when I learned about this case, I watched one video, and that was the first thing that I noticed, is it sounded like there were gunshots coming from two different places. And it wasn't because of that. You would hear one gunshot going, and then a second one would join in.
Right.
To me, it didn't sound like there was one, and then you heard the reverberation of that one. No, you would hear one, you would hear the reverberation of that one, but you would also hear a second one coming in from time to time throughout this shooting. That was one of the first things that I really noticed, and I always second-guess myself, and I still second-guess myself now, but that was the first thing that I really, really noticed that made me think, okay, maybe there's something else here, and then it just got crazy from there.
Yeah, and and there was something else I watched. I went and I again typed in M240 Bravo, which is one of the weapons I'm thinking that was used. If you listen to the gunfire in the videos, and then you listen to an M240 Bravo being shot, it sounds identical. An AR-15 fires way too fast. Way too fast. AR-15 can, full auto, I believe, can fire 800 rounds a minute. M240 Bravo fires 600 rounds a minute. So that's something that people should really look at. If you're if you kind of have some doubt, like, well, how would he get a belt-fed weapon? Well, if he was involved with a gang, a lot of those gangs, they deal arms, so that may be something they could come across at some point. It could be used, but again, it goes back to, was this guy even the shooter? Was this a gang thing, or was it? I think obviously it was a government operation.
Yeah, and if like one of the latest things that I've been hearing is that he got everything legally. Okay, so how does he get things legally that aren't legal? So if this bootstrap or whatever the heck it is, whatever this thing that allows
the bump fire stock,
the bump fire stock. Thank you. Can you get that legally?
Yes, it's not regulated by the ATF.
Okay, and can you get that in Las Vegas and in California?
I believe you can get them in California. You can most definitely get them in Nevada.
Okay. Now, the other thing is, do the police have these?
Bump fire stocks?
Yeah.
To my knowledge, law enforcement, they do not have any fully automatic rifles. So I think the only fully automatic weapon they may have is an MP5, which is a submachine gun. I don't think, at least here, the agencies around here, they have semi-automatic AR-15s is what they have.
Okay, and what is the reason why they wouldn't have it? Because it's not, it's...
So I'll explain kind of what. There's only one purpose for a fully automatic weapon, that's suppressing fire. So once if you think in a military concept, once all the riflemen's rounds are spent, somebody on an LMG will start to fire while the riflemen are reloading their weapons to suppress the enemy, to keep the enemy from popping up.
Gotcha. Okay.
The other term is called cover fire.
And so then could this guy have been doing cover fire for somebody else, or for these other 4 areas where we pretty much know that there were shootings happening?
That's very possible.
Isn't talking about it.
That's very possible.
Keeping them pinned down, and but still doesn't explain a lot of different things. So, okay, if this guy was able to get it legally, let's say that the police had this too, would that have helped them?
If there was multiple shooters, no.
But
not in the military, not in law enforcement. But if you've got 3 or 4 different active shooters, you don't know. It's going to be kind of hard to, at first, pinpoint where they're coming from. I don't think, me personally, if I was trying to take down somebody that had a fully automatic weapon, I want something semi-auto so I can be accurate.
Right. So the only
at that range with a semi-automatic weapon, you're going to want something that's got a scope on it, so you can, whatever your target is, you can magnify it and make it look bigger so that you have an accurate. So no, I don't think it would have helped. And in reality, it probably could have created more victims, because if there were people still in those rooms and you're spraying all over that building, those rounds might hit somebody.
Right. So, I mean, it's like, well, damn, I guess it goes back, do we really need those? I mean, what would you need that for, aside from, from having to defend your country?
Right.
We also can't discount that and say, well, just because it's so rare that you might have to use it to defend your country, to defend this nation, well, we're not going to give you that tool. We're going to punish you because this guy decided to use that tool and kill a bunch of people.
Right, and that's the basis of gun control, is that people talk about gun confiscation all the time. I don't think they're that. It's going to be done slowly. And these types of events help really push that legislation through the Senate and Congress and things like that.
Yeah, isn't it just like on a global scale of just kicking down doors? Just the same way that our soldiers did in Iraq and other countries. They kicked down the door one by one, and they systematically took people's guns. Don't we see that same thing here?
Are you asking if that would be something that would happen?
I'm asking if that's something that is happening now, just in a more stealth mode.
Possibly. I'm not sure. I would think if that's happening, even if the mainstream media doesn't cover it, which I think that me and you both know that if that was something that was actively happening, we'd be hearing about it, because not everybody's going to be quiet. My opinion is that if that was being done, you would be hearing about it, and people in the firearms community would be up in arms about it. And I think that if that was ever done on a mass scale, they would lose, just because there's so many people in this country with firearms. Not saying it's not happening,
yeah.
but I think if it was, we would hear about it in our community.
Well, isn't it kind of like that boiling frog thing, where it's like we don't really notice it until they're gone? I mean, we can look at just like stats, right, and just see, well, okay, back in the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, 40s, what were the gun laws in California, and we can look at what the California gun laws are now and see, oh man, it's getting worse and worse and worse, slowly, but and if California is one of the worst states where it's almost like they try to make it impossible for you to have any guns, to me, I mean, that really bothers me. It really bothers
right.
me.
And I will say that, I own a couple of AR-15s, and I don't want to register them as assault weapons.
Turn them in now, right?
Well, no. What will happen is if you don't modify it, and I'll get to the modification in just a second. An assault weapon in California is defined as any semi-automatic weapon with a telescoping stock and a pistol grip, and a flash hider. And a flash hider is on the end of the barrel. It kind of suppresses the flash. So what I did, and with the help of a friend, is we kind of went through the legislation and looked at this. So if you want to modify your rifle in California so that it's only defined as a long gun, you have a couple options. One, you can get what's called an AR mag lock, and basically what that does is it locks the magazine in so that you can't quickly release it, so you have to take the upper and lower receiver apart to let the magazine drop out. Now, we already had something that made it harder to rapidly change a magazine. That's called a bullet button, and you had to use a tool or the tip of a bullet to drop the magazine. So now what me and my friend have done is we went through the legislation, and they don't, when they talk about the flash hider, they say a flash hider. They don't specifically say a muzzle device. So I took my flash hider off my barrels, and I put a muzzle brake and a compensator on them. And they both do different things. So then they say you can't have a telescoping stock. Well, they make a fixed stock. So I got fixed stocks. And then they say you can't have a pistol grip. So what I did is I didn't take the pistol grip off, but they do make a, what's the material I'm looking for? I believe it's polymer. And it's basically a sleeve that goes on the pistol grip so that you can't wrap your entire hand around it. So I just modified my weapon so that it doesn't fit the definition of an assault weapon, and I can take the bullet button off and put a standard magazine release on it.
Which is bringing up a great point. Is it seems like it doesn't matter how many laws that they make. If people want to figure out a way, they're going to figure out a way to use these guns, to modify them. And these laws that they keep trying to pass have nothing to do with the actual problem. And
no, it doesn't.
Go ahead.
It's incremental. It's incrementally just trying to disarm people. So that eventually what's going to happen is, I believe they'll get as far to say, the people that own guns, you can keep them, but no further sales of firearms will be allowed in this country. And then what are you going to do?
So it's almost like we're getting people ready. It isn't just about us that are living in this world now. It's about the future generations that are going to come up and thinking that, to not have a gun is normal, whereas, you and I might have been brought up to think that, there's nothing wrong with having guns, and it's just
right.
like they're just going to take those away. They're going to take away books. They're going to take away this. They're going to take away knowledge, and they're going to take away, our protection. How do we protect ourselves if we don't have guns? For me, that's a big question. Because if you take away my guns, that is a big threat. It's a big threat to me. So that's always bothered me. And I see that more and more.
Yeah, you know what else you're trying to do is, and this bill's been in Congress for like 6 years, it's really stagnant, is the Congress wanted to outlaw people from owning rifle-grade body armor. Now, rifle-grade body armor, there's two kinds you can get. You can get ceramic plates or you can get steel. I have steel, so my armor is graded to stop rounds up to 308. And I'd rather not get hit if I'm wearing that. It's going to hurt. But it does provide some protection. And when you look at that, you got to wonder, like, wow, why would they want to get rid of that now? Because, you haven't heard. I mean, the only thing I can think of would be the North Hollywood shootout when those two people went into the B of A and they robbed it, and they were getting shot and they had body armor on. But you don't hear about these mass shooters ever wearing body armor, and the media saying, or the police saying, we couldn't kill them because they had body armor on. Now we got to get rid of it. So it makes me wonder why that law is there. You can buy body armor online. I bought mine on the internet and fitted it the way I wanted. So it, and it goes back to what you were saying about how scary this incremental disarmament of the masses is becoming when they start to go after things like body armor. Now, starting January 1st, in California, you cannot do bulk ammo orders online anymore. That will be illegal. That's how I order my ammo. I never go to a store and buy a box or two at a time because I spend more money that way. I spend more money buying one box at a time, as if I order 1,000 rounds of rifle ammo at once. I save money. So,
okay. All right, well, let's just kind of finish off here. I would just like to get your view on gun rights in this country. Are you in favor, after hearing about this shooting, let's say, you think that this guy killed all of these people because he was able to get access to these guns. Do you think that's going to help?
No, because I don't have access to them. The average person doesn't have access to them. Criminals are going to do whatever they want to do because, and this is the best example I can give people. Murder, rape, child molestation, fraud, those are all illegal, but it still happens. So what would make more gun laws stop more gun crime? So I'm absolutely in favor of people being able to own firearms. Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely am too. I've chatted with a couple people who were like, if this guy didn't have this gun, or if he didn't have that, then, he wouldn't have been able to do this and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, you know what? The only laws that they ever pass are just ones that take away our rights. They make us less safe. So maybe we should look at that. Maybe we should look at the fact that back in the 60s and the 70s and back then, that they didn't have these mass shootings, and they probably had more access to guns. Maybe the problem is not guns. Maybe we should look at some of these, pills that we're giving people, these anti-depression pills. We give people anti-depression pills that make them more depressed. We are just, we have totally lost focus. We have cars that are basically made to bend, and then everybody's, you kind of dent someone and it's like $200, $300, $400. We used to have real steel cars. We used to have real, things that would actually help us. It just seems like as we move forward, we're not safer. We're actually just kind of being put in this bubble that is making us less safe, and that's what
right.
I'm scared about. I'm really worried about that because you can see where this is going, and it's almost like it becomes a script because of the narrative, the false narrative that they've created about this Las Vegas shooting. They're going to use that for what? I mean, we already have Hillary Clinton already talking about, right? I mean, from day one, she was talking about guns. It always goes back to the guns. It's never about that person and the fact that, you know what? This is one person out of millions of people that have access to those same guns that did not do what this person did. People like that are not going to talk about the fact of how rare this is, as opposed to how many people have access to those same guns. They never talk about that.
And the last thing I really want to, the last couple of things I want to touch on is when you were talking about antidepressants. When my dad passed away when I was 9, I was put on SSRIs, and that's Wellbutrin, Prozac, I don't know what else is out there, Adderall. Those things, I didn't feel normal. I felt different. Now, I never did anything wrong, but when I stopped taking them, I felt better. I kind of had a better perception of what reality really was. I felt like I was kind of living in a false reality. And then I want to touch on what you're saying is using these victims as a way to push legislation. And I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, never waste a good tragedy. I think that was the quote. I can't remember who that was, but that's exactly what they do. And I wish it would become a little more clear to people that these things are happening more and more, and the more they happen, the more gun laws are being passed or legislation to hurt people. So, I wish people would start to kind of try to see that instead of thinking that they're crazy or that people are, that's never going to happen. That can't happen here. Well, yeah, the thing that I say is it hasn't happened yet.
And that's from Rahm Emanuel saying, you never let a serious crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that is it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and if you consider that source, then it raises a lot of more questions there.
Yep.
All right, my friend. Anything else you want to say before we end this?
I guess the only thing is that if people want to keep interacting with us on this topic, just go ahead and do a Facebook search of the Las Vegas shooting investigation. It's a closed group. If you're friends with me or with Greg or with Dan or whoever, you'll see that they're in there. Just shoot an invite and we'll get you in. I kind of want to get that started as soon as possible so we can get as much information at once as we can before it kind of starts to get old and go away.
Cool. Sounds good. I think we'll have to work on getting some more of those, getting the actual police reports, any police recordings, and any 911 calls. So I think we have a good chance to get a lot of that stuff now, and I think that's going to be our next step.
I agree.
All right, brother. Thank you, man.
All right, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you joining
Have a good night.
And we'll chat with you again.
All right.
All right, bro.